Hey there, welcome to episode 3 of Collin and Mono. My name is Colin Sparling. Welcome back to the show. I hope you and yours are doing all right. I know this whole coronavirus thing is kind of taking the world by storm right now. It's basically all they can talk about in the news, and it's been crazy over here in Seattle too with all that going on. So yeah, man, it's affecting me just as much as it is I'm sure a lot of you guys. So I hope you and your family are healthy. I hope your friends are healthy, and I kind of just wish everyone the best in these trying times. So today I bring you an episode I think that is a little bit more lighthearted in nature. This is a conversation between a friend of mine. His name is Collin Macintosh. And one of the things that interested me about Mac, among many things, because he and I just can't shut up when we're around each other, is the fact that he actually went through film school, and I would consider him a cinematographer. I mean, he is a cinephile, he is a photographer, but I also like his eye for cinematography. So I figured that would make for a great conversation to see what inspired him to get into film and how he came to love movies and things like that. And what I really like about this conversation is it comes across as more of just a candid conversation between friends. It just sounds like two people just enjoying each other's company and talking about like everything from movies to a bunch of other stuff. We definitely go off the rails a little bit here. We talk about our general love for movies. We dive deep into the plot of a couple of movies. It's just a genuine conversation, and that's what I like about it. It's fairly lighthearted, and I think it's great for a time like this when it's really hard for us to physically be around each other and just enjoy each other's company in a more physical way. So I hope I can at least offer some of you guys a couple hours of escape with this conversation. Just hopefully you can just imagine yourself sitting down with us and having a couple beers and just hanging out. So yeah, without further ado, here's my conversation with Collin Macintosh. Let's start the show. All right. Sorry, I just had to play around with our levels to make sure we were good.
Yeah, I mean, I can just keep talking.
Yeah. It looks like it's going to be fine.
Are my levels looking like your levels?
Yeah, they're looking pretty similar. I have our gain set to like pretty similar levels.
I mean, I'm pretty close to this mic. I don't really think
honestly,
I need to
as long
get
as it doesn't run hot, like I mean, I'm going to be messing around with the volumes and stuff in post a lot.
Are you recording as two different tracks? Like you got
Yes.
mic 1 as a track, mic 2 as a track? Cool.
Right.
Have you named your mics?
What's that?
Have you named your mics, or they're just mic 1 and mic 2, or is one like Barbara and the other Sally?
Yeah, the one's Barbara and the other's Sally. No, I don't know which one would be which. I haven't memorized which one's which. Barbara Streisand?
No, just Barb. Is this Barb?
Hey, Barb.
Or is this Sally? Are you chatting up Sally, or am I chatting up Sally? Remember, this is going to be...
No, real talk. Is Sally short for something?
You know... I never thought about it. What would it be, like Salandra?
Salandra?
What would Sally be short for? But I mean, Barb's Barbara, right?
Yeah.
And maybe somewhere it'd be Barbrand. That sounds like it could be something. Probably not, but Sally. No, I'm gonna go no. I'm gonna go hard no. I think Sally's just. I think that's what it says on the birth certificate.
I mean, if we had someone like Jamie, I could be like, Jamie, look that shit up. I have no idea if Sally is short for something.
Jamie, look that shit up.
Jamie, look at this big motherfucker.
Is Jamie a big motherfucker?
No.
Jamie's like 6'4",
dude.
Like 320 pounds of pure, just like ripped, shredded muscle.
Well,
it's like no one fucks with Jamie except us.
Yeah. Well, fuck. There was an episode. And I don't remember what it was. An episode of Joe Rogan.
Are we rolling right now?
Yeah.
Oh, even better.
And they looked up a picture of this giant fucking ape, and true Joe Rogan form, he's like, look at this motherfucker.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's and they were talking about chimps too, which was really interesting. But I don't want to. Let's not spend the podcast talking about another podcast. How do you want to kick this thing off? You want to start with some introductions, or
we can. I'm gonna roll us in, and we're just gonna get to talking, man. We can talk all we want. We can spend as much time before or after we roll in talking.
All right, real talk.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get real with you.
Yeah. How are you feeling right now? Are you feeling good?
I'm feeling anxious because I need to know, am I talking to Sally or am I talking to Barb? I need to know how to politely address this mic.
Well,
sorry,
yeah,
not Mike.
You are
Sally, Barb. Barb, I think Barb.
We're gonna call that Barbara. I have Sally over here.
All right, now next step, label makers. You need to get on it. You can print them out at work, cut them. I want to see next time I'm here. I want to see on this right here, somewhere where it's visible to your guest, Sally or Barb. Obviously this one's Barb, unless you're flipping them, or unless they're like doing the thing that twins do, where they like got a boyfriend, but then they're like, oh, let's pretend to be each other for a day, and they're like, does that include boyfriends too? And they're like, yeah. And so unless you're doing that, then you can get weird with it, and it can say Sally on one side, Barb on the other. Then you're, audience, and then maybe like a little red dot that you can move around or something. But yeah. I expect a label. If you don't make these, I will make them and give them to you, wholly expecting you to put them on there. So this one needs to say Barb, and yours needs to say Sally, at least at some point in the near future. Do it.
Yeah, I'll do it. So, and then while we're kind of like speaking interstitials here, so heads up on these coasters. The condensation builds up on these coasters and it'll stick to the bottom of your glass. And when you pick it up, it'll stick and then it'll fall and make a really loud noise.
I have a theory.
So you just do put your pinky down as you pick up.
I have a theory that is every coaster ever made, except for the cardboard ones that are at the majority of bars. I had some that were cork that I bought at IKEA, and I had them. I still have them on my coffee table. And the issue would happen, I'd move it based on wherever my glass was. So sitting on my computer, I'd move my my coaster over next to I'd move it next to the computer and then have it there or on the coffee table. Whenever I picked up my glass, same thing, it would stick and then it would fall. Now, the weird thing that happens is when it falls, your instinct, your reflex is to catch it. But when you have a full glass of beer in your hand and you go to catch your coaster, I've lost a keyboard because of that.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so when I was recently up in Bellingham, we did the brewery passport and got a couple of these nice like leather coasters with different breweries' logos like pressed into them, which looks really cool. And I was like, okay, this will solve the problem. It's because they're cork. That's why it's happening. The old ones, these cheap IKEA ones, they look nice, but one of them's broken. Anyway, same fucking thing happens, man. And then they stain. The leather stains. No one tells you that. So I've got these weird, because the two things going on this coaster are going to be coffee or beer, and they're both staining it to where it has, one was Aslan Brewing, which is this really cool lion's head print on there, and it's just half of the thing. It looks like, when you get like a breed of dog that basically has like an eye patch because its fur is like dark over one eye and half its face. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yep.
It looks like that now. And because I don't know if it was coffee or beer or what, bottom line, these things, they don't stick as bad as the cork ones, but they still stick. I know this makes for a really exciting conversation. It's a coaster talk with Collin and Mac.
Collin. Oh, I was going to say Collin and Collin.
Oh, yeah. CNC talk coasters
Yeah,
today.
CNC talk coasters. All right, I'm going to roll us in. What's going on, everybody? My name is Collin Sparling. Welcome back to Collin and Mono. Today, I am joined, as always, by a very special guest. His name is Collin Macintosh. Mac, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. So, to fill out the ongoing mythology of your host, Collin Sparling here, Mac works with me at Optimism Brewing Company. We have worked together in about the past year at the time of this recording that I've worked at Optimism Brewing. And Mac and I quickly became fast friends. We bonded over music, I think, pretty quickly.
Yeah, in your interview, right after your interview.
You're right. And then, of course, beyond that, we bonded over video games because some of you might know that I'm a very big video game fan. So Mac is a big fan of the Yakuza series, and if you follow me at all, you'll know that I'm also a huge fan of the Yakuza series. So we quickly bonded over that. And Mac and I have had a great time talking about video games, talking about music. But another thing, especially that I want to talk about today, is movies. Mac is what I would call a cinephile, and it's cinematography too. So one of the most entertaining things for me, Mac, is watching movies with you. I love watching movies with you because
we need to do it more.
Yes, and that's because I love how you can give like a breakdown of exactly what the hell is happening on screen. It makes it just adds so much, and to some people that might be annoying, but I love it. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, my girlfriend can definitely probably tell you how annoying that can get.
So where I want to steer the conversation, Mac, is so I want to know what got you interested in film in the first place, maybe when you were a kid or what have you. And then what eventually made that turn into going to film school? Because you went to film school too, right?
Yeah, no, I did. I I spent most of my life in and around Wilmington, North Carolina, and growing up, my stepdad was a camera operator, so he was a camera operator on shows like Dawson's Creek and there was a lot of Dawson's Creek. Now I don't know why I'm all of a sudden drawing a blank, but he did movies like Virus with Jamie Lee Curtis, one of the Baldwins. I don't know if it wasn't Alec, wasn't Billy. Maybe it was Billy.
I don't know who Billy Baldwin is, full disclosure.
Well, there's like 12 Baldwin brothers. It's hyperbole, but there's a lot of them, and they're all varying levels of skill. Most people know Alec. The other ones you'd recognize is the one who was in like Usual Suspects. And that's the one who was also in Biodome. I've always liked that one. As he's gotten older, he's kind of gotten like a fat head. I mean, I guess all the Baldwins have all kind of gotten a fat head. And there was one who was in a different Baldwin who was in a movie called Fair Game with Cindy Crawford back in, this is probably like 94, let's say. This is like the height of Cindy. Do you know who Cindy Crawford is?
The name sounds so familiar. What's the big movie she's been in?
A model. She was a model. She was one of those, like kind of like Tyra Banks was like a model who was like in some acting stuff.
And then she had her own day show, right? Like day talk show. Tyra Banks, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was like a View type thing. Maybe.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm pretty sure that's where I know her for. I think it's just called Tyra.
Oh no. Yeah. Tyra does. Yeah. Sorry, I think you're still talking about Cindy Crawford.
Oh wait. Okay. Yeah.
So Cindy Crawford is the model I'm thinking of, and she there was some weird we were getting real derailed right from the get go, but there was some controversy of on Instagram because she's probably in her 50s now. I think she's still pretty smoking, but she had like posted like a bikini picture or something on her Instagram, and everyone was like, I guess this is a thing, being ageist or age shaming her, like, girl, you're too old to be doing this or whatever. And I was like, I don't know. I think she's fine. Even at like 55, like Cindy Crawford still got it. But she was one of those people that she was still like walking the runway even when she was pregnant. This was probably back in the early 2000s. And everyone was like, oh my God, you can't even tell she's pregnant. Is she anorexic? It's like, there's always this controversy. Anyway, she's in this movie called Fair Game.
Yeah.
Let's bring it back to movies.
Yeah.
She's in this movie called Fair Game with one of the, now even going further, one of the fucking Baldwins. And so she's in this movie. In the movie Eraser, I think, came out a couple years later. That was kind of like the weird return of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he was with, was that Tyra Banks? He was in it with someone who was a model, who there was, again, some weird controversy with her. I don't know. Anyway, so my stepdad had filmed Virus, and then he had filmed a couple of the James Bond movies. I know he did License to Kill. I think he did a little bit on Her Majesty's Secret Service. And just kind of a bunch of... there's a movie called Sun Chasers, which I think is now on Netflix, which has...
Sun Chasers?
Sun Chasers, yeah. It's got Woody Harrelson. This is probably when he was like fresh off of Natural Born Killers. And he plays a doctor or a psychiatrist. I remember having copies of the script in our house as a kid.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we had so many scripts. We would use them after, obviously after the film had wrapped and stuff. So we had a wood stove in this one house we lived in. It was like really, really old. And in that house, we you got to put your kindling and then your wood and all that, and underneath you get normally crumple up newspaper or something you got.
For you, it was scripts.
It was script pages. we had stacks and stacks of scripts because he would get these scripts, so we kind of knew like what you were shooting on for the day and all that, and so you kind of knew what the movie was, and so we had all these scripts everywhere, and we'd rip them out and just crumple up the pages and put them in there. So that's like. I just used scripts to light these fires. So, I mean, film had been a thing in my life since I was a little kid. I'd always grown up around it. I'd gone to movie sets. There's this terrible Martin Lawrence movie called Black Knight, which came out early 2000s, late 90s.
Oh, I remember this movie.
That was filmed in Wilmington. There's this whole medieval set. And me and one of my good friends at the time, we had gone to the set to kind of watch some production stuff. And this is the moment when I learned on old monitors on set, they would have basically your widescreen bars for how, because back when everyone still had full screen TVs, your widescreen bars, and then how it would look, on a full screen TV. And
so would they have like the letter, well, not a letterbox in this case, right? But they would have the bars that were cropping the image on the sides.
Well, yeah, well, it wouldn't be bars. What it would be is so on the monitor you would have they were red. And you would have basically, it would show what the camera was seeing, the full image. But on the edges of the screen, you would have these little red, corners, 90-degree angles that would show, that's how it's going to look on the film stock. That's how it's going to look when it's printed, edited, and all that.
Sure.
And then you had these other little red squares in the middle, which were, like a 3x4, saying this is how it's going to look in, on someone's TV at home. Mm-hmm. And, because a lot of people back then, they don't see movies in theaters. They watch them on VHS, yada, 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 or it plays on TV. And so old movies that were shot widescreen, they would, if they weren't able to do it well, like let's say the character moved real far screen right and then real far screen left. And so they couldn't just crop the whole scene because the action was moving with the outside of,
outside of frame.
Outside of frame. Right. They would do what was called pan and scan, where they would basically slide the frame or slide what the audience was seeing over the the wide frame of the film to capture the action. So there's some movies I think like I don't know if it's like Gone with the Wind, or there's one classic movie where it's like whenever you watched it on TV, like on USA or something when it would play, it was notorious for like pan and scan. And then you have like the things like overdub, like there's a scene in Blade when it would play on like TNT where
Wesley Snipes?
No, not Wesley Snipes' character. Who's the older fella? Is like the guy.
Oh shit,
Whistler.
Yes,
Whistler was.
I forget who plays him.
There was a scene where he's like, "Oh, smells like a vampire wiped his ass with it." But in the overdub, it would sound like "smells like a vampire wiped his rear with it," and it was just like so poorly done. But stuff like that was all done mostly for TV because that's how a lot of people are going to consume these things.
Right. I've seen something like that in like. And this is a slight tangent, but like if you get like remasters of video games, right? Mm-hmm. One example is like the remaster of Resident Evil Remake.
Yes.
A lot of that, it would be pre-rendered backgrounds, right? Mm-hmm. So when you would choose like the widescreen option, you would get the pan and scan. Essentially, like if your character was moving from the top of the screen to the bottom and you had widescreen on, the camera would just pan. Whereas if you had it in full screen or the 4:3 aspect ratio, you would get the full picture, the full rendered image.
Yeah, I think... in most things, I'm not a purist. I think that the modern way is kind of the better way to do it. But I think if you're going through like Resident Evil on PS4 and it's the GameCube remake, I would always recommend people anything with like pre-rendered backgrounds, even the old Final Fantasy games. I would say just do the full screen version. You're kind of playing it how it was meant to be played.
Right. Well, yeah, and also like by playing a widescreen, you're losing part of the field of view too as a player.
Yeah. Which plays a little bigger of a role when you're in, like a shooter or something. But I think in those games that are kind of slower, those are things that it was designed a certain way. It's kind of when we were watching 13 Samurai.
7 Samurai.
Sorry, I'm mixing up with 13th Warrior.
Yeah, that's all right.
Which is a great. Have you seen 13th Warrior?
I think you told me about it.
I think I told you about it when we were watching 7 Samurai.
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. It's a similar concept, but think 7 Samurai, but with Vikings in a weird way.
Gotcha.
Actually, I think it's now. Fuck, I need to go back and watch it with like a critical eye. And I need to go back and watch 13. We need to watch 13th Warrior together. We're gonna put this on our homework. That's our homework is to watch this movie together.
Okay.
Anyway, full circle back. Grew up with all these scripts in the house.
Yeah.
Going to these sets. Funny little tidbit about Martin Lawrence: hates animals, and is apparently incredibly difficult to work with. Like if you look at him wrong, he can essentially get you fired. At least this is how it was back when he had just come off that show Martin, where his ego. He had already done like Bad Boys, just the first Bad Boys, and just some things here and there. Anyway, in the movie Black Knight, his stunt double looked almost identical to him, and probably did like 60% of the movie. You're looking at a stunt double and not even looking at him. If it doesn't show his face, it's probably a stunt double. I remember when I was on set and I was watching the stunt double, like he was looking at himself in a monitor, like doing like in the camera. And I was looking at the monitor thinking, oh, that's Martin Lawrence. And then someone pointed out, but they were joking with him because this thing like Martin Lawrence didn't want to be around animals, didn't want to touch animals, especially horses, didn't want to do anything to do with any animals. And so
God.
this is like a medieval set. So you got like
Is he
pigs running around
germaphobe or something?
He's a little weird. As you know, sometimes actors can be that. I mean, people can be that way, but it seems to kind of act. I don't know. I'm not trying to shit on actors. I like actors. They work incredibly hard. But Martin Lawrence anytime I see a movie with him, I just imagine the director's frustration. Whenever I see him he hasn't really been anything. Every once in a while you'll see his name.
Sure.
It's not super common. I think the last thing I saw him in was maybe it was like 2010, 2011 was the Death at a Funeral. It was a British movie originally, and then they remade it in America. And it had like Chris Rock and Danny Glover. And I think Martin Lawrence was in there. And I think I remember watching this like, oh man, this would have sucked to work on this movie. Just because he's on set. You know, you got all these other great names and stuff. And then fucking Martin Lawrence is there. And so with him, they would make jokes on set about like, oh, watch out, Martin, there's some grass there. Oh, watch it. And just like little things like, but they were all talking to the
stunt
double.
double.
Yeah. Stunt doubles, like, you know, or acting double. But he kind of got it. You know, he wasn't, he had no loyalty. He was just doing his job. He happens to look a lot like Martin Lawrence, although a little bit more muscular, I think.
Yeah. So you were on all these film sets growing up, and you were on scripts and stuff because of your stepdad, correct?
Yeah.
Because he ran the camera.
Yeah, he was a camera operator,
Okay.
often second unit, but did some first unit stuff too.
Oh, right on.
And so second unit's basically like, let's say, for example, this actually happened to be one of my professors in college, was the AC, the assistant camera for my stepdad on Young Indiana Jones, which was a lot of it was directed by
TV series.
Yeah, the TV series.
No
yeah,
shit.
Yeah. My stepdad had done a lot of Young Indy, and there was a scene where George Lucas was like, "Hey, we need to get some footage of like Times Square, make it happen." And they didn't get any permits or anything. And this is before like digital. This is back in like the early '90s. So everything's still on like this 35 millimeter film stock. And so they go into Times Square, unload their sticks, their tripod, and load up their camera, film, and just start rolling B-roll. This is what second unit does a lot of, is they're just kind of getting that other footage, or like,
Right.
let's say they can't be there, you'll have like a second unit director to get like pickup shots, that sort of thing. And so they're in Times Square just rolling. No one says shit. No cops.
Wow.
No one walks up and is like, hey, do you have a permit or anything? Because they didn't ask permission. They were just like, George was like, hey, we need some shots of Times Square for this thing. And so they're all right, and go out there and just like unload and film it. And this is a story I found out about years later when I had this guy as he taught my directing class and one of my that's one of my filmmaking class. It was another class that I had, but the same professor for both. But he was telling me these stories because like once he realized who I was, because he saw my last name. And was like, wait.
Wait, so did you take your stepdad's last name?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
Him and my mom had gotten married when I was 1.
Oh, okay. So he was your dad.
Yeah.
He was your So he actually full blown adopted you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so yeah, the funny thing is my name didn't actually even change until I think I was like 9 or 10. They would just tell schools and stuff. This is pre-internet. They would just be like, oh yeah, last name's Macintosh. Whereas my name was Stam. which was my real dad's last name. This is a whole
I knew some Stams back home, actually.
But my family is pretty Scottish. So, and my mom's maiden name's Scottish as well. So so basically I just embrace Macintosh because it's a Scottish name. That's essentially what it all is on my mom's side anyway. Even though it's not my name, that's kind of who it is now. You got to start somewhere. Anytime you get a family name, you got to start at some point.
Gotcha. So that's super. That's actually a pretty awesome upbringing to be around someone like that.
Yeah.
So at what point did you realize, like, hey, I want to do something with this? I want to go to school for this sort of thing.
Well, for a long time, there was a short gap where I wanted to be a cop, and then we're going to come back to that. But when I was a kid, I didn't really know what certain people in movie sets, what their jobs were. I knew what a camera operator was because they operated the camera. It was all in the name.
Right.
And I think I had this idea that a producer was a director. Because they produce things. So if someone asks you to produce something, you will pull something out of somewhere and give it to them. They're like, I need you to produce your wallet. You will pull out your wallet and give it to me. You've created that thing seemingly out of thin air. It was your pocket, but that. So I was like producer naturally because I guess as a little kid, that's just kind of the conclusion I drew. And I would go around and tell people, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a producer. I want to be a producer. And then my stepdad would be like, producers are assholes. And I was like,
they're the people that from the fucking company that come down on you for not getting shit done.
And as a kid, I was like, I'll fit right in. But and so and then I think what I really wanted to be was a director. And
the guy that tells everyone on set what to do. Yeah,
well, I mean, yes, in a way, being a director is telling everyone what to do. It's a lot of delegating, but really, the director's number one job is to tell a story. The number two job is to elicit an emotional response from an audience. Now, everything plays a role. Directors get a credit. They get the award, the best director. And the thing is, anyone you would give the best editor to, like, that award to, is the one that you really didn't notice they did anything. Because, like, a good editor, you don't notice the editing.
Yeah, they're like the roadie of the movie world.
They're a very underappreciated profession, and editors put in a whole hour, so much time. I mean, everyone does. Putting a movie together is an exercise in collaboration and doing a lot of stuff like that. But in any production, really, I don't want to sidestep, even stage plays. You got everyone on there has got a job, and everyone's got to do that job well if you want the ship to sail smoothly. So anyway, I thought I wanted to be a producer. And, and then the more I learned, I realized, I'm a very visual storyteller. Some directors and directors I've worked with, they're very hands off. And you even hear this about Clint Eastwood, is he's an actor as director because he started with acting, then moved to directing. And, the thing with that is he'll roll in, be like, all right, go, one take. And then he'll, we're done for the day and just leave. But Hollywood loved him, or Warner Brothers specifically loved him, because he always came in ahead of schedule and under budget. And then his movies always did well and made money. So he was just a golden goose egg for them. He just kept just performing.
Wow.
And so and then you have people like Kubrick who will spend 30 days because an actor isn't opening a door the right way.
Very meticulous.
Yeah. And so I think my directing style would have been somewhere in between. Anyway, so I like the thought of telling stories, and I like the thought of having people see things the way I see it, or hear a story or understand it or interpret it in a way that I saw it. So that was kind of, I think, what I was really getting at. Whereas producers are more in the job of kind of like making it happen. They're going to be the people kind of listing. They're working with the agents, getting the actors there, finding funding, working with, your location scouts and getting the permits and just doing just all the bullshit no one else wants to do. Right. But that's why they get the big bucks, That's where they get, where they get a cut, and they can work on multiple projects at the same time. But it's just a whole lot of knowing people, calling people, and just a lot of spinning a lot of plates at once. But 24/7. If you're a successful Hollywood producer, your job never stops. You're working 13 hours. You're calling people, you're moving stuff around. I'm sure you can finally get to a point where you can kind of do whatever you want. And then you have people who are like famous directors who will produce stuff because they know enough people that can kind of like get all the puzzle pieces to fit for someone, especially if it's someone they believe in or someone that they know is like, oh, this kid's going to go somewhere. So let's kind of move some stuff around. But anyway, so what kind of got me into it was being around it. I'd always known movies. I'd always loved movies. For me, it was a magical experience. The first movie I ever remember seeing in theaters was Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park?
Yeah, I was probably about 3 or 4 years. I was way too young to be in that theater, that's for sure. But
did it scare the piss out of you?
It didn't.
No, really?
I was like at the height of like the 90s dinosaur
craze,
and I just ate it all up, man.
Fair enough.
I had the backpack, I had the lunchbox, I had the toys, and I hadn't even seen the movie yet. I had the shirts.
You were ready to rock.
I was a Jurassic Park kid, right? I wasn't just a dinosaur kid. I was a Jurassic Park kid. And I remember the first word I ever learned how to spell was T-Rex. Not even kidding. The first word I ever wrote down that I learned how to spell, it might have been mom or dad. 3 letters, easy. Sure. T-Rex, I was stepping it up. I got to 4 letters.
And a hyphen.
Oh,
shit.
And and so I remember I have a very vivid memory of we were living in Florida at the time. And my stepdad was working on something up in Wilmington. So we'd come up to North Carolina, sometimes like rent a beach house or something. And we'd stay in there while he was working on something so we could see him for a couple of weeks, especially during the summer. Right. Me and my brother and sister were out of school. So we'd come up. And I remember I had this Jurassic Park like coloring book. And I remember on a page in pencil, I just kept writing T-Rex. And I was so proud of it. And it just felt so good and looked so satisfying. But like my little like 3-year-old hands, I didn't know how to read yet, but I could write T-Rex and I could see T-Rex on something and know what it meant. I could see it on a poster. I could see it on a T-shirt, and I'd be like, I know that. That's my favorite dinosaur. And I think there's a part of me, it's probably still my favorite dinosaur because I think unlike velociraptors, the T-Rex didn't terrify me. Velociraptors were just smart. Like the T-Rex was like Jaws, Also, right. Both Spielberg movies, but it was like it was terrifying. You watch it eat people. It could crush anything. It was just force to be reckoned with. But the Velociraptors could think, and that to me was scarier. And it's like the T-Rex. If you get eaten by a T-Rex, you're gonna be dead fast, right? Now these Velociraptors, the whole beginning of the movie, he's like scaring the hell out of this kid, saying, oh yeah, first they're going to gut you. And then they're going to do all this stuff because the kid was like, oh, they look like a giant turkey. If you couldn't tell, I love Jurassic Park. We need to sit down and watch Jurassic Park.
Yeah, it's been quite a few years since I've seen it.
Have you seen it more than twice?
Yeah.
Okay, then we're going to sit down and watch it and just talk over the whole thing and break it down. Because that's what I think that's my favorite thing. Now, like when you're watching a movie again, like you and I would probably do really good watching Blade Runner as well, or a lot of Ridley Scott stuff.
Oh yeah, anything Ridley Scott, pretty much I love.
We'd probably treat it like Seven Samurai, right? Where we would start just like breaking down the set design, the mise en scène, oh, this guy's acting, and all that, and how the directing and why they make this choice, and just and you could probably maybe find an interview that talks about why they made that choice. But it's fun just to theorize, like what was going through Kurosawa's head when he, did this scene or like decided to light it this way, or especially when you know some of the behind the scenes stuff, because you knew a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, right? And we could kind of like bounce off of each other. And then we looked up stuff about how they burnt down that water mill.
Yeah, they actually did burn it down several times.
Yeah, several times. Yeah, and it was like, oh my God, just like the heart that goes into those movies. And now you get a lot of this modern schlock. Don't get me wrong, I consume modern schlock like the next guy, but it's just, I'm glad we haven't seen a Transformers movie in a while. Because it's just...
Yeah. They just don't make movies like they used to.
They really don't, man. And then and then didn't you have people like Tarantino who he says that, once it switches to digital, he's just going to stop making movies. Because he's like, once he's unable, I mean, it has switched to digital. He's just not keeping up. But he said once he can't shoot on 35 anymore, he's just going to stop, which I think is dumb. I like digital, but I get it. That's the other thing. I think it's dumb, but I understand.
It's the way he likes to shoot, and he likes the way it works. So
But he's a storyteller.
Yeah.
You know, I think like as a director, I mean, I get it that that's important, but like he's a storyteller, and that's the medium that he tells that story. If that medium changes, doesn't mean he should stop telling stories. He's a damn good storyteller. That's his job. Now, I get if like some weird cinematographer is like, oh, I refuse to do it. It's like, all right, well, you're gonna be out of work. Quentin Tarantino's got so many, millions and millions of dollars. He can float on it for the rest of his life. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. So the question that I wanted to ask you is that, was there a point when you knew that you wanted to be involved with filmmaking? Is there like a movie you saw that was like, yeah, this is what I want to do? Or was it kind of like a bunch of things that kind of like all built up into like, yeah, I want to do this?
All right. So it's kind of
a mixed bag.
No, I'm going to try and keep it as brief as possible. But you know me, I'll run on. So stop me if you need to.
Okay.
So this is probably going to be the most pretentious thing I'm going to say all night is, movies for me are like religion. When I was a kid, I grew up in a Christian family. I grew up going to church, and then I kind of fell away from it. And then, I rediscovered it. There was a gap, and then I rediscovered it. And then I fell off it again, and I'm still off of it. I'm not with it anymore. Let's just say that. And so I had a point where I was in, I don't know if it was a Sunday school thing or something. I was probably like 11 or 12, and either it was like a youth minister or I don't know if it was a pastor or something, but they had asked me, they said, when did you know you were a Christian, or when did you know you believed in God, or something like that? And for me, I was so confused by the question because I'd grown up Christian, like from day one.
It was just a thing that happened.
Yeah. As a little kid, it was like, God exists, Christ, the Holy Spirit, all that stuff. And so there was not like at that point, there wasn't really a defining moment of like, oh, now I believe in God, Right. And so it was, and I think when it comes to film, it's a similar struggle when asked that question is because I don't really know when it happened, but there were periods where I was super into it and then a period where I fell off it, and this period I came back. So that I can kind of speak to, but not as much about just like, I would love to say, I was always into it. But I grew up with it, we lit fires using script pages. And my family always had like a movie night. It wasn't like a scheduled movie night. And that's something I still try to do now because I think movies are something that are meant to be enjoyed with other people. I think it's totally fine. People want to binge Netflix on their own or watch a bunch of stuff by themselves. I like going to the movies by myself. I think it's very therapeutic. Yeah. But I think, I think that movies are really best enjoyed not only with one other person. That could be really good, especially with something you really care about and you can kind of like gauge the other person's interest in it. But enjoyed with a group of people. So I love a theater experience where it's like when movie theaters go away, my heart's going to break. Because I think going to a movie with a bunch of people and kind of like feeling a room's reaction to it is something magical. And so I had a big family when I was a kid. It was me, my brother, my sister, my mom, my stepdad. So there's 5 of us sitting around the living room watching a movie. My sister's 7 years older than me, so she wasn't always into the same things. But I was that kid that watched, like, when my grandmother babysat. My grandmother's had seen probably Batman like 50 times because I don't even remember all the times I saw the first Tim Burton Batman, but I owned it on VHS. So I would literally pop, and Batman's my favorite superhero too. I would pop this VHS in, I'd watch it, finish it. As soon as credits rolled, hit stop, hit rewind till I heard that in the tape. Stop. Yep. Then I hit play again. I'd watch all the trailers at the beginning of the VHS, and then I watched the whole movie. I did the same thing, weirdly enough, with the movie Page Master, which is like a weird Macaulay Culkin animated movie where it's like live action him.
I think I've seen clips of this.
He's
movie.
Exploring like Gulliver's Travels and Treasure Island and all this stuff. And it's an interesting. There's dragons. It's a weird movie. I haven't watched in 25 years or something, but it was good when I saw it. But so movie night, we would do this. And I remember specifically whenever I think of movie night with my family, I know exactly the house. I know exactly the living room. We moved a lot when I was a kid too. So I remember very specifically saying I watched this movie called The Immortals. And in The Immortals, if anyone listening has ever seen this movie, you know that how old I was, probably like 7. You know that a 7-year-old should not have been watching this movie.
So for context, sorry to stop you. So The Immortals was also the name of the sequel to 300, right?
Yes, but not that.
I know. It's not what we're talking about. So I just wanted to give context. So the movie you're talking about,
Was it called The Immortals?
something like that, right?
I thought it was like, it wasn't 302. That'd be
No,
great.
no,
I wish they called it 301.
300. It's gonna be like Final Fantasy 300-2.
I gotta look. I can
No,
keep,
I'm pretty sure it was The Immortals.
I'm gonna have to multitask here, which is something I really struggle with.
No, that's okay.
No, I have to know now though. What is the sequel to 300?
So I didn't know there was another movie called The Immortals.
No, the second one came out in 2014. Fuck, the first one came out in 2006?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, dude. This is Sparta means have been around for that long.
Oh my God, that's 13 years ago.
Yeah.
I feel old.
Shit, that is 13 years ago. Fuck.
So 300, I thought it came out in like, well, I guess I thought it came out in 2007, which really isn't that big of a difference. But the second was called 300 Rise of an Empire.
Wait, then there was another movie called The Immortals. I swear to God there was. Unless it was like a remake of the one you're talking about or something. I don't know.
I hope that I want to remake The Immortals.
There was definitely a movie called The Immortals. And it might have still had, what the hell is it? Butler.
Gerard Butler?
Gerard Butler. I'm pretty sure I had Gerard Butler in it.
I didn't see anything pop up. There
Unless I'm
was
crazy.
like The Immortals is like is it Marvel?
The Eternals.
That's the Eternal. Oh,
Yeah.
I really know how to differentiate. Anyway, so I'm going to read off some of this cast for The Immortals. It's got Eric Roberts as Jack.
This came out when? This movie?
1995.
Oh, wow. The year
So,
before I was born.
I would have been 7.
Wow.
Yes, I was 7 when I watched this movie. No, that was my guess, right? Didn't I say I was about 7?
Yeah, I think it's what you said, yeah.
Oh, wow. Nailed it. First
Shit.
try. It's got Eric Roberts, who is Julia Roberts' brother. He plays a character named Jack. So he's like the focal point of this whole movie. Dude, we're going to watch The Immortals.
Okay. Sounds like we're going to have a list by the end of this.
Yeah, we're gonna. The more movies I think of, I'm like, dude, I love this movie. So there's a couple movies that are like, they're not great movies, but they're some of my favorite movies. Some of my favorite movies are kind of B films, and they're like,
Yeah, I have movies like that.
one, and it's not like, oh, I love this because you've never heard of it. I'm not doing the whole hipster thing. I love these movies because my family happened to watch these,
Yeah.
or I happened to. Oh, I've got a whole thing I'm going to tell you later. We're going to get around to it. Anyway, so he played Jack, which now Eric Roberts' character gets bonus points because when I was a kid in the early mid-90s, the coolest name a character could have, and this kind of carried on to the early 2000s, but it started becoming kind of cliche at that point, but it was like Jack. Like even Jack Bauer. I think Jack Bauer was the last cool Jack. Samurai Jack. 24, the show 24.
Yeah.
Jack Bauer, Kiefer Sutherland. Mm-hmm. And then you had
Titanic, Leonardo DiCaprio.
That was a Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was mid-90s.
Yeah.
And then you had I just said it. What was it? Jack Bauer, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jack. Oh, Samurai Jack.
Oh, fucking Samurai Jack.
But that was like early 2000s, right?
It's like 2001, yeah.
Yeah, around there. And so Jack is just like the epitome of cool names. Like I'm like this is Jack. You know?
Yeah. I mean, not like it's cooler than Goku. I mean,
Yeah. Jack is like the Western Goku. So that's canon now.
Son Goku.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's got Eric Roberts, Joe Pantoliano. You would probably know him from, he was in The Matrix, bald fella. The guy who was like screwed him all over. Sorry for a 20-year-old spoiler.
Yeah. Well, Matrix 4 just got announced, so.
I saw that, which is weird. Another like less than like 17-year spoiler. Didn't both Trinity and Neo die?
Shit, dude, it's been so long.
I think Trinity died and then Neo sacrifices himself at the end. And then they were all like, oh, he's going to come back, but in another... Anyway, I don't know.
I mean, Hollywood likes money. They're going to
Yeah.
find a way to retcon
And I guess
it.
now it's the Wachowski sisters are going to do it because both brothers transitioned. The Wachowskis?
Oh.
I guess they just go by the Wachowskis now.
I didn't know that.
But I
didn't
think
know
it's
about this.
Lana Wachowski. I think she's going to do, I think that's who was attached to. You know, I like it when you have siblings directing movies. Like you have the Coen brothers. And then the Farley, is it Farley or Farley brothers? People did like something about Mary.
Oh, shit. I don't know.
Anyway, so Joe Pantoliano, he was also in Bad Boys. He had hair. And that one, he was like their police chief or something.
Wait.
I'm going to show you his picture.
This is still
This
the
guy.
Immortals
Do you
you're talking
recognize
about?
this guy? Yes, I'm still talking about the movie The Immortals. He was in Memento.
I've never seen Memento either.
Oh my God. Dude, it's like one of Christopher Nolan's best movies. I just watched it again like less than a year ago.
Mac, you should know this about me by
Holds
now,
up.
dude. There's a lot of movies I need to see.
I know, and also like I was around when these movies
Yeah.
I was like old enough to go see them. Anyway, so it's got do you know who Tia Carrera is?
I know the
You
name.
seen Wayne's World?
Yes.
Yeah, Tia Carrera. She's in it. A very young Chris Rock is in it. William Forsythe. So he has not aged so well, but I knew him. He was in Devil's Rejects. I guess that was 2005. So that was only 10 years after this. Halloween. I'm trying to think of a movie that you let's see. Tell me if you recognize his face. William Forsythe.
Oh, yeah. That looks familiar.
First thing I ever saw him in was Immortals. Cause he's like, I can't believe I just got fucking killed by a prostitute. No, a stripper. That's what he's mad about.
Oh, my God.
I'm going to spoil a little bit of a movie that came out in 1995. We're going to watch it togetger. But
Okay.
he gets shot in the stomach. So they're robbing. This is the scene that I was going to get. Let me, we're going to get through this. Chris Rock. You know who Chris Rock is.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's it. That's basically the end of like the big names, which these are all people who kind of went somewhere, but I'm not going to say they were nobodies in 95, but they weren't as big. Chris Rock, this was like, it's kind of like an in-between role for him. Anyway, so the premise of this movie is that this guy, Jack, gets all these people together who have records, right? They all meet up at his nightclub and he goes, hey, I need you all to rob all these places. They've all got these safes and we need you to go in there and we need to get the money out of the safes. And so they're all going to wear these stupid Pinocchio masks with these long noses. And so they all go in and they're like, you're going to do this in pairs. And so they all run off to these places. And one of them is like, they got to rob a strip club. One's like a laundromat or like a dry cleaners. And there's like, anyway, and then they're all going to meet back up here. Now, turns out these safes belong to like the mob, and they're pretty pissed off about this dude robbing. This is also now when I saw this movie, I had not seen Taxi Driver yet. So this is the first time I'd ever seen a scene where someone had a gun in their sleeve, where it's like, whoosh, comes out, and now all of a sudden also, where did that go? That was in like so many movies in the 90s, and it's just gone.
So wait, did all the movies like take it from Taxi Driver? Is that where they got it?
I think Taxi Driver was the first one because in Taxi Driver
It came out in the 70s, which is like
you've seen Taxi Driver,
of course, yeah.
Yeah, because he like took parts of a drawer and kind of fashioned all that up. There's a whole montage of him getting the thing put together, and he's like burning his wrist over the stove and all this weird stuff. Anyway, there's a scene, the best. And I maintain, now you got the good, bad, and the ugly. You got a three-way Mexican standoff, right? You got Clint Eastwood. I really wish I knew the other two fellas' names. These other two great actors. It's spaghetti Western classic. And they're all doing a Mexican standoff, right? Everyone's aiming a gun at everyone else if you don't know what a Mexican standoff is. The Immortals, in my opinion, still has the best Mexican standoff in cinematic history. You've got, man, it starts with like two small groups of people in a kitchen. And they're all aiming guns at each other. But then you got Jack on one side and you got the leader of the other guys. He's like a bag man for the mob. He's like, Jack, why'd you steal our money? Blah, blah, blah. It's kind of, everything's kind of, this is the climax, right? And they're all in this kitchen. They're aiming these guns at each other. And then another person will come in, another person come in. Now we got everyone in there. And Jack will be like, so-and-so, aim your gun at this dude with the big fucking ears. Aim your gun at his head. If he moves, shoot him. And the other guy be like, all right, John, aim your gun at this bitch's head. If she moves, shoot her. And then she's like putting one hand over the other. Because a lot of these people have two guns too. So they're like throwing one hand over the other, like aiming at multiple people at the same time. And Jack's like, all right. Sam, if this motherfucker who's got his gun on her twitches, I want you to blow his brains out. And then the other guy, he'll be like, all right. You. And it sounds like it'd be in a satire film, like a scary movie or something like that. It's not. And he's like, all right, if he moves there. This whole time, it'll keep like cutting to a guy in the kitchen holding a massive plate of dishes. And he is scared shitless. He's shaking like, oh my God. And they keep laying these pieces out. And then until everyone's got a gun on everyone else. And then eventually the other guy's like, all right, Jack, looks like we got you. We got 7 guns to your 6. And Jack goes like, whoosh, and pulls that gun out his fucking sleeve.
Oh,
aims it at that dude. And he's like, 7-7. And I'm just like, this is gold. This is fucking gold. And then naturally the dude holding the dishes gets spooked and like drops them and just chaos ensues. It's one of my all-time favorite scenes in movies ever.
So in other words, this movie is a huge inspiration for you.
Massive, man. This was like
filmmaking.
And there's so many good scenes. There's a scene where they're driving down the road, and this dude's got like a bottle of I don't know if it was Jim Beam or Jack Daniels or something. They had just robbed this place, and I think they're fleeing from the cops, right? And so one of the guys that's in the car with them is he's slightly like developmentally disabled, and they're in like a Bronco or some big like precursor to the SUV, and driving down the road. And he's chasing the cops, and the guy looks at him, and the dude's chugging down this bottle of whiskey while he's trying to run from the cops. And the other guy looks at him and goes, I don't think you should be drinking and driving. Just don't worry about it, George. I drive better when I'm drunk. And then he like clips a car that's parked, and then George looks at him and goes, I guess that could have been a lot worse, huh? And like, it's such a dumb joke. But every time for me, it landed so well. And when I was a little kid, I didn't get it because I didn't even really understand what being drunk. I saw this movie when I was 7. Again, I saw this movie when I was 7. There's a scene where they're robbing a strip club. I also had watched From Dusk Till Dawn around this same time because Showtime, the movie channel, was back before they made shows, was showing. It was basically like cheap HBO. That's what Showtime used to be.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where it had George Clooney aiming like a 6-shooter at the screen. He goes, you. He like cocks the handbrake, goes, you, be cool. And it was like a montage of like a bunch of different movies that they were playing throughout that summer. And in the bottom corner would show the title of the movie. And so that scene has nothing to do. I mean, it's in the movie, really doesn't play a big role. It was From Dusk Till Dawn, which also was directed by Robert Rodriguez.
Right.
Quentin Tarantino's in that movie. He's in like, yeah. I love From Dusk Till Dawn. It's so good.
Yeah, I fucking love that movie because it's such a weird movie, and then all of a sudden it just takes a turn and turns it. Well, spoilers, a vampire fucking movie.
Vampire movie.
And then everyone's just blowing everyone's fucking brains out. And it's
they're
nuts.
like fashioning crucifixes in their bullets and like stabbing vampires.
It's like the perfect fucking like
it's so good.
B movie, I guess.
It's one of those movies that if I sit someone down to watch it, I don't want them to know anything about it.
Yeah.
Because then it goes to the opening, they're robbing that gas station, which is such a good scene. I'm like, Tarantino totally wrote this scene and then just gave it to Rodriguez to put in the movie because they're buddies. They watch they did Grindhouse
it was
together.
A Tarantino as fuck scene. I was like, you could put this in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, exactly. He wrote that scene, and so they did the whole gas station robbery scene. And you're like, what? Okay, so it's these two brothers. They're on the run. They're trying to get to the Mexican border. They're trying to get away. All right, we got Cheech as border controlman. All right, okay, and now they kidnap this family. They got this RV. All right, they're across the border. All right, they're gonna stop at a strip club. Cool. Okay, Quentin Tarantino just kicks Cheech again, but now it's Cheech as like a door guy at a strip club. So Quentin Tarantino kicks him. Cheech plays like 4 characters in this whole movie.
It's a fucking wild movie.
And And then he kicks them in the nuts. They go in, and you're like, okay, they're enjoying the strip club. Oh, they're not allowed to drink here. Oh, he shows he's got like a class whatever license because he drives a fucking RV. Now he's a truck driver, and these are his friends, even though he's got his fucking 16-year-old son and, I don't know, like 17, 18-year-old daughter with him. Anyway, they're all hanging out at this almost Mexican strip club. It's like right on the border. And then we got Selma Hayek. She's dancing with a python all of a sudden.
Yeah, and in a very extended scene, and then just out of nowhere, it turns into vampire
and now
movie.
It's
all
a
out
vampire movie.
Chaos. And the movie, it's not a happy ending to a movie. It's just like this girl's fucking whole family gets blown to smithereens, and then she's like, yeah, well, here, George Clooney's like, well, here's a bunch of fucking money. I hope you go home safe. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
From
so
Dusk Till
much.
Dawn is such a wild fucking movie.
There's a scene in that though where he's got like one of the hostages and he like goes, you be cool. And I thought as a kid, that just looked rad, but I'm watching movies like The Immortals at 7 years old. I had Pulp Fiction, all these movies. My mom had one rule. If there's breasts on screen, me and my brother had to cover our eyes.
Oh my God.
That was it. Violence didn't matter. Language didn't matter. I grew up with my mom throwing the F-bomb around left and right. The first time I ever got in trouble in school was in kindergarten because I didn't know what fuck meant. I was just walking around going like, fuck, 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 fuck. Until I came across this one kid who just looked at me and went like, and then he ran. He sprinted and told a teacher, and I got in trouble. And naturally, my mom shows up and is like, I don't know what the big fucking deal is. Hey, she didn't really say that.
So, Kyle, you got in trouble for cursing at school? Yeah, sorry. The fuck, dude?
When I was a kid, my mom threw it around left and right. And so she doesn't anymore. But
Same.
This was also, it was a different time. And she was a lot younger. I think, she wasn't, I guess she was a year younger than I am now when she had me. But, anyway, so I'm watching all these movies. Big thing, we just had to cover our eyes if there was breasts on the screen, which we would try and peek and everything too, because we were little kids. We just wanted to know. We just wanted to watch what we weren't allowed to watch. But the thing is, when you're allowed to watch everything, and then you kind of start like absorbing it and appreciating it, and so I saw this thing, and I had this. This is back this is early '90s. This is pre-Columbine, so violence is. For kids isn't that bad yet,
Right.
And, I was reading like The Punisher and all these guys were like so cool. And so seeing George Clooney just like, you be cool. I was like, that's
the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen.
So I had to watch this movie. Anyway, that's how I found out about From Dusk Till Dawn. But we watched The Immortals. Dude gets shot in the stomach by a stripper. She's holding like a shotgun and just like, she's only wearing like a thong. But it's one of those like 90s thongs where it's like pulled way up. Like, so it's like up above her hips, like, it's just because that's how everything was kind of cut back then. And anyway, so seeing movies like that growing up, we always had family night. Now it's full circle. So this is kind of why I like doing movies that are a little different for our movie nights. And so watching those, that was kind of it. And then for some reason, probably around like the freshman year of high school, I decided I wanted to be a cop. And I think a lot of it probably played a role in, I watched a lot of cops in movies, I thought. But like the movies I was watching was like Bad Boys and stuff. And I was like, oh man.
Yeah. So,
cops are so cool.
So you thought it was going to be like a 90s action movie.
Yeah. I was like, being a cop. Just
that is such a classic kid thing.
I know. Yeah. I partially blamed my joining the military on video games. I think it was probably Call of Duty played a role in a way. But that's just kind of how it works. And so but I remember there was a point, and I knew that I was like, I either want to be a cop or and this is kind of when I started learning what the jobs were. I either want to be a cop or I want to be a director. And there was a moment when I was at basic training and we were learning how to clear rooms, and it was like kicking in doors and like moving through hallways and all this stuff. And I remember that was the moment where I was like, I'm kind of getting my fill of the action stuff now. I think I want to be a director. Like I decided that when I was at Fort Benning in Georgia, I was like, I want to go into movies. When I'm done with the military, I want to go into movies because I don't really need to be a cop anymore. Because my end game for being a cop now, if I were to do it, I think I'd want to be a detective and investigate crimes and that sort of thing. But back then I just want to be on like SWAT. I essentially wanted to do the shit I was doing with the Army.
Right. So so when you went to the military, you had gotten your fill of, that type of shit.
But back when I wanted to be a cop, like there wasn't a war going on, or there was nowhere for me to like want to like, oh, I could go and do this actual like cool action movie shit. And in reality, I understand the weight of it all now. It's not all action movie shit. Some of it is, but it's not all that way. Explosions are still cool. As long as no one's getting hurt.
I mean,
look, as long as no one innocent is getting hurt. Explosions, like if you just fire, it's why we like fireworks. Fireworks are cool to watch, but they're just explosions. That's all. They're just colorful explosions. We just are drawn to like bright lights and loud noises. We're still monkeys, you know?
Yeah.
And so like explosions are still cool. As long as no one innocent's getting hurt. That's my disclaimer on that. But,
right. So you're already in the military. You're like, I've had my fill of the action.
Yeah.
And so you get done with the military. Then that's when you. So when do you? Let's start there. When do you decide to go into film school? Is that directly after the military? And what year is that? Like, give me a timeline.
So this is probably like. So I was reserves. I was active for a year when I was in Iraq from 2009 2010. But you know the benefit of being in reserves is you still have an opportunity to kind of live a relatively civilian life, you know, if there's not some kind of emergency you get called up for, any of that sort of stuff. So I'd finished my deployment, been to Iraq, done all that. And then I enrolled, I'd already done a little bit of community college at the time before I deployed. I think I did a semester, maybe 2 at North Carolina. And then I got back, and then I think I did like I think I only did 1 semester before I deployed. And then after I got back, then since I had been active for a year in Iraq, then I got better GI Bill benefit stuff. And so I was able to pay for college and better, because the thing is when you're reserves, it goes off of like how much time you were active. And so since I had that, I got more money, and it's the whole thing. And I'm assuming it's the same. It might be different now because this was also almost 10 years ago. So, I then finished up community college, got my associate's degree, but I was already set. I already knew. I took a introduction to film course. The weird thing is the one I learned, I'm gonna give him a shout out, David Kreutzer. He was my professor. I had him at community college. I learned more from him in 1 semester than I learned, pretty much about like just basic principles and production. I learned more in that 1 semester than I pretty much learned the entire 2 years I was at university, because I got my associate's degree at the community college. Then I had to do 2 more years at university to get my bachelor's degree in film. From 1 class, I took 1 with him. And from then I was able to go out, buy my own camera, start shooting short films, start writing. And then I learned more along the way. A lot of it's just, you learn by doing.
Sure.
And that's so much of film. And that's kind of like the whole Kevin Smith film school is, you know, he didn't go to film school. He just loved movies and took out a bunch of credit card loans and didn't ask his boss permission to film Clerks, and just filmed it at work and kind of made a movie. And a lot of it is just, and even in Hollywood, like we talked about the young Indiana Jones stuff, like there are no permits for that. We get some footage of Times Square, just go get it. A lot of it's guerrilla filmmaking, which is one of my favorite times, but there is a lot of logistics that kind of go in there. But anyway, I get back, I go there. I'm like, okay, I want to do this. And I just wanted to tell stories the way, like, I just wanted to tell a story that I thought was funny, or I thought was interesting, or shoot a scene that I thought looked cool. And it's kind of like comedians. You have comedians who always want to like play toward the audience. They want to do, well, I tell jokes to make the audience laugh, because I know kind of what tickles them. And I think I get pleasure from making a crowd laugh.
Sure.
I always wanted to make the things that I wanted to see. So I guess I'm kind of a selfish filmmaker.
Yeah, but you can't be the only one.
Yeah, no, I'm not. And there's a really good, I think it was Hollywood Insider had this really good round table of directors, and Quentin Tarantino was there, Ridley Scott was there. There was a few other directors there, and all very like acclaimed directors, and they were kind of talking about why they make movies. And it was just so fascinating to hear these different people talk, because none of them made movies for the same reason. And one of them was like, oh no, I just make the movies I want to make. Whereas like Ridley Scott was like, oh no, you gotta, and like other ones was like, oh, I try to speak to the times and to the audience and get a message across. And it was just kind of interesting to hear how all of these other filmmakers viewed filmmaking. And it's not so dissimilar from video games. A lot of companies will say, oh, well, as a company, we the whole conversation about politics in video games. Some you'll have some publishers or some developers who go, no, it's our responsibility to put these politics in the games because it's a message that we think is important, and this is a way to get it out. And some filmmakers feel the same way. Like,
Right.
Spike Lee is a huge political filmmaker. Like almost every single one of his movies has a political message behind it. And sometimes it's more on the nose than others. I think his most recent one was Black Klansman, amazing film. But the last bit of it is kind of centered toward, the modern uprising and like white supremacist movements, and calling attention to it and how like the modern administration is towards it. And it's very political. And there are people who say, oh, keep politics actively. And for me, I'm one of the filmmakers who are I guess potential filmmaker. I've made some short film stuff. I haven't made a feature or anything, but I was one that I wanted to be one that just wanted to tell a story that I like. And I tend to like stories about shitty people in shitty situations, kind of like you made your bed and then now we're going to go over the process of you sleeping in it.
Oh my gosh.
I really love those stories. And because they're also stories of like, there is a morality there. There's you reap what you sow.
Right,
you live
right,
a bad life, you will probably come to a bad end. And there's a couple movies that I really like that are really good examples of this. Like The Rover's really good. Killing Them Softly. Both these came out maybe within the same year, about a year apart. And they're two, as far as from like a visual standpoint. I'm gonna step back for a second and then I'll come back to this. I like directing. I really do. I like working with actors. I especially like directing things that I write, but that's because I never really had a really good writing partner that I worked with. Back then I was in my early 20s, and most people on my set, if we were shooting something, were just friends. Like my buddy Josh at the time was kind of our sound guy, but he never studied. He was an aerospace engineer, and so he just liked. I just taught him. I was like, hey, the style is this, the style is this. If you hear him peaking, like bring it down, watch this gauge, and then someone, one of my buddies would be like a boom operator. I like using lav mics so we don't have to rely so much on booms, and then I would kind of light my stuff. I would always have my friend Sean would always be, anything I worked on, I liked him as my camera operator because I knew he moved a camera the same way I did. So we kind of learned that together. And so it was one of those things where I was like, oh, we'll just have him do it. Because I knew I could be like, hey, this is what I want to do with the shot. And he was like, got it. And I knew that I, had it. So I tend to be, I'm not on like Kubrick level, but I'm a little controlling on a set. But the thing is, I've also been told that the shoots that people work on with me go smoother than almost any other shoot they've ever worked on, because I do a lot of pre-production, a lot of like, man, I'm a terrible artist, but I do storyboards. Sometimes they're just stick figure storyboards. I'll do overheads of like lighting setups. Be like, camera's going to be here, light's going to be there. I'll do, I try to do rehearsals with the actors as much as possible. There's all these little pre-production things that I like going into just to make it run smooth. But anyway, I like doing that. But I learned that I might be a better cinematographer than I am a camera operator, which kind of goes into like the photography stuff that I still do for Optimism. And the biggest thing when taking a picture or when shooting a scene is, we all see things a little differently.
Right.
Whether it's our eye sensitivity to light or what we're just focusing on, what stands out to us, it's all different from person to person. And whenever I take a picture, so it's different when you're taking a picture from marketing. Like if I'm taking a picture of beer, I want to take a picture that makes that beer look damn good because I want that beer to sell. But if I'm taking a picture, like if you just looked at my Instagram or like my portfolio, the stuff that I like to photo, I like to photo beer too, don't get me wrong. But the stuff that I'll photo on my own time, I normally do it when I travel, because the things that are near home I kind of take for granted. But when I see things that stand out to me, I kind of want someone to see that thing the same way I see it, And I think at least with photography, you can capture something in a moment and say, when I looked at this building, I only kind of really saw like this corner of the top 2 floors and the sky. And that's just really what stood out to me and looked cool. And so I can, with a camera, you can capture that and you put that in Photoshop, you can adjust the shadows, you can kind of really make it how you remember it. And so I like doing this when I travel because I can show people like, these are pictures from my trip. And they're like, there's only 7 pictures here. And I'm like, yeah, I took like 500 pictures, but like these are the only good ones.
These are the ones that matter. Yeah,
These are the ones that matter. And so I'd rather just show them those, 5 or 7 photos or whatever and be like, no, this is how I'll always remember this trip. And so the same thing when filming, a short or something, I want the audience to see this scene how I see it in my head. And to me, when you're writing and when you're working with the cinematography that you're really close to and directing something, and this all started as something you just saw in your head. You thought, oh, it'd be funny if these people read this line this way and did this, or oh, it'd be cool to see this action scene, or what if it looked like this? To be able to like think of something, whether you dreamt about it or talked to someone about it or workshopped, however you came up with the idea, to write it down, type it up, get your cast together, get your crew together. Generally, it's people you work with. Generally, like, I'll work on your thing for free. You work on my thing for free. That's how it is in like a lot of indie filmmaking stuff, especially when you're, new.
Sure.
And then you shoot the scene and, or you've finished the whole project and then you edit it. Either you're editing or you're working with an editor. Generally, if it's no budget, you're probably writing, directing, editing your own stuff. And, then you get your sound mix in, you get your music, you put it all together, and then at the end of the day, you can hit play, and you can watch this thing that you created. And to me, that is one of the most satisfying feelings I've ever had in my life. The closest thing to that right now is like to go into Optimism and look at the menu screens every day, and know that thousands of people look at those screens and see my pictures, and my pictures might be the thing that convinced them to buy that beer. And to me, I'm just proud of it.
Yeah, and you should be.
And so but making a movie is a very similar feeling because you're it's different. It's for some people, it's like, I've made a movie, it's selling well, look at all these numbers, people are enjoying it. For me, it's not as much about, it's not about the success of it. It's about me being able to look at something tangible that could potentially exist forever that I thought of. And it is a little egotistical. But it's also, you put a lot of work into it and it's something that you've created.
Yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
The curse is sometimes you end up hating it. Like there's a lot of stuff I make. If I go back and watch them now, I had someone want to watch a bunch of I did this short, it was a web series, and someone wanted to watch it and they wanted to watch it all, which probably would have been like 45 minutes total worth of stuff. And I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to start it. I'm going to go out here and have a couple of beers. I can't be in the room while you're watching it. Yeah. I can watch it all day long, but I see everything wrong with it. But if I'm in there with someone else, I'm looking at their reaction. I'm looking at the screen. I'm just like, I am so focused on like, oh, did that joke not land? Especially when you're working on comedy stuff. And now I can't go back and watch some of the old stuff I made because I'm like, it's really bad. I'm like, it's not funny. It's like if a famous stand-up comedian were to go back and listen to their like open mic nights,
Sure.
They're going to be like, this is terrible.
Well, yeah.
But you got to bomb. You got to bomb at the beginning.
Exactly. I mean, a great example would be like when I first started podcasting. I loathe the day that I decide to go back and listen to those very first episodes of the On Land podcast for the Ohio State paper called The Lantern. Yeah. Those first podcasts, I just remembered in my head, I lost my train of thought a lot. There was a lot of dead air because I was just like, I wasn't thinking on my feet.
Were there a lot of ums?
Yeah. There was a lot of hesitation words. There was a ton of that. And so it's one of those things where it's a learning experience and you just learn by doing. But at the same time, even if that thing is shitty, I think it's awesome to feel that this is something you made. It's a tangible thing that someone can listen to, someone can watch, someone can read, and
it's going to exist forever.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as you don't delete like everything. Well, yeah. It's out there. And that's something like maybe your kids will want to listen to one day. Or,
exactly. And that thing is yours and no one can take it away from you because you grow, a lot of people in modern society grow up listening, watching, reading, other people's stuff.
Yeah.
And so to have that
majority of people.
Yeah. And I mean, and then some people may go their entire lives without ever making something wholly original that can be consumed. And I'm talking in a media sense of course, whatever you do at work.
Yeah. That, but there is a percentage of people.
Stuff to be enjoyed by other people, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, there's still a percentage of people who, and this isn't, I'm not trying to shit on these people because these people are 100% necessary. And I think it really falls on the majority of people. A lot of people they just go about their day. They go home.
Yeah, I mean, some people don't want to do that.
They clock in, they work, they clock out, they go home, they consume some media, they relax, they spend time with their friends and family. I'm not trying to belittle that at all. I think that's wonderful. I think that's kind of what we're designed to do.
Yeah.
But that is also the majority of people. So I think to be able to be someone, I sound like such an egotistical asshole, but but to create something, and I hope everyone, this is something I really do hope for everyone because it is such a level of satisfaction. I hope everyone gets a chance or seeks a chance. Anyone who wants to. If you don't want to, it's not a big deal. You shouldn't feel pressured to. But anyone who wants to, I hope people like to say like, oh, I just never had the time. I didn't have the time. And really it's like, you didn't make the time. I try to never say I didn't have the time to do such and such. I try to say I didn't make the time. Oh man, why did you want to listen? It's like, sorry, man, I didn't make the time to listen to it. Because I feel like at the end of the day, it's really what it is. Because it's like, oh, but you did make the time to watch this like reality TV show or to spend 4 hours on YouTube. Like you made the time for that, but so I think it's more fair to everyone just to say, well, I didn't make the time to do that.
Yeah.
But I think if you're able to make the time to create something, to practice something that you're interested in, whether it's, you want to learn piano, there's YouTube videos now. You could start somewhere. You want to, there's ways to do things, whether it's you want to learn how to sketch, write. I think if you feel even remotely inclined to explore that level of creativity within yourself, I think it's very important to try and make the time to do that because like at the end of the day, it's so satisfying to have something tangible that you've created. And I think a lot of people don't feel they have the opportunity or don't know how to go about it. But I think it's easier than people think. You just really got to just set some time aside and kind of do a little deep dive in whatever it is, even if it's cooking.
Yeah.
Cooking you can be incredibly creative and you can share that with other people.
Yeah. And you could be anywhere from absolute novice all the way up to an expert.
Yeah.
And still make something that's good.
So I think that I really believe everyone has the capacity to do that. I think just a lot of people don't care, don't want to, and that's fine. If you don't want to, like, it's not a big deal. But I think if you feel like that's a scratch you might want to itch, 100% explore that. Like whatever it is you want to get into, if you want to create something, like the world always needs more creators.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And you don't want to be one of those people that are like, I want to do this thing. I want to write a novel. Let's use that as an example, right? And so, okay, I want to write a novel, but I'm not going to do it because, like, I don't know where to start. Like, I don't know how to do that. Mm-hmm. Well, you can learn. If you have a will to learn, you'll learn how. And even if your first one's not good, maybe your next one will be. You just,
gotta start.
You got to keep
start
writing. You just,
something.
you just got to. The first step to creating something is just doing it.
That's 100%.
Yeah.
It's that level. And it is daunting. It's intimidating.
It is. It's anxiety filled.
You're terrified that you're just going to screw it up.
Especially if you're sharing it with other people.
That's the worst part. Sharing it with other people is hands down the most terrifying part of creating anything.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because you want approval and it's very difficult to take criticism, at least for me. And I think for a lot of people it's difficult, especially when you just know the first time you do something, it's probably not going to be that great. I'm not saying it's going to suck. Some people are just naturals, and that's really awesome for them. I just know the early stuff I made, and probably, I haven't really made a lot of stuff since. I think my photography's gotten better, but I don't know. I could get behind the camera and try and write and direct something now, and it might be terrible.
Right. I mean, you never know.
You got to practice. You just got to stick with it.
Exactly. And most people aren't naturals at it, and that's fine.
Even some of the best people weren't naturals when they started, and then to bring it back to comedy too, I think a lot of comedians, they're like, oh no, for my first 5 years, I sucked. I was terrible. They're like, I had to learn how to do my act. And I think that's just part of it is you just practice, and it can be a hobby, but I think creating's fun. And I think at the end of the day, just having something, I think that's worth it. And we're all kind of becoming little creators in our own way. Everyone's got a camera now.
Right.
Everyone's got a camera with a phone attached to it. And that's kind of what we carry around our pockets. That's what smartphones are now. They're just
right. Which has its pros and cons, but
it does, yeah. But I think it gives people a chance to, it's such an introductory level, essentially free, and you're already paying for the phone regardless. So, it's not like you have to buy film stock or anything. You can just take some pictures.
No,
you can start there.
I did the first half of the quarter in my video class with my phone.
Phones now. William came in the other day and was showing me some slow-mo footage he caught on his phone.
Yeah.
And it was blowing me away. I was like,
that's how good phone cameras are now, dude.
I know I'm like, dude, the video, if you could swap lenses, that would be a game changer. But like, that's the only thing that really puts my camera above his phone. Cause I'm like, your phone is getting better video than my camera can get. Cause I can't do that. I can't do 4K at 140 frames or 120 frames. Like my camera cannot do that. It doesn't have the capacity for it,
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that's basically what you're paying for with phone upgrades anymore. I mean, that's pretty much the only thing they change.
Yeah.
But
yeah, the camera changed. I mean, the phone part never changed. That hasn't changed.
No, we're gonna put a slightly
years,
faster processor so you can scroll through your social media apps a little bit quicker. But otherwise, yeah, we're just gonna give you a slightly better camera every time.
We're getting cynical, but I think we need to do a beer and pee break.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna do a beer and pee break, guys. So. We'll be right back. We're going to throw in a little music break, and we will talk to you just in a second. Obviously, you won't hear this in editing. Okay, bye. Be back.
This is fun.
Yeah. Right.
Too much. I felt bad. Like anytime I bumped this, I was like, oh fuck.
I mean, the shock mount's there for a reason.
Yeah,
so
I couldn't hear it, so I was like, that's good.
Yeah, these shock mounts are pretty great. This one is actually a little loose.
Let's try these real quick.
Yeah, that one's actually pretty good. What is this?
It's a coffee cream ale.
What the fuck?
Oh, that's good.
That smells strange.
It's like hazelnut, right?
Chestnut.
You don't see a lot of that.
Dude, that's fucking weird. I don't know if I like that.
Those are 3 magnets in a Olympia coffee. Yours is really good.
It is. Fuck. I've had, this is beer number 4 for me today.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Kind of into it, though. I'm in the mood for weird right now.
I'm to the point where, hi, we're back.
Hey.
I'm to the point now where I think I can pretty much palate any beer.
I can do most.
Like I can.
It's because it's coffee and hoppy. I think that's
right. And I'm not saying necessarily like them, but I can palate pretty much any beer. You know what I'm saying? Like if someone sets a beer in front of me, I can more than likely drink it.
Yeah, it's only like I think it's really just like the triple IPAs that like when it's so bitter and hoppy that it starts doing something to my stomach.
Yeah.
I'm like, oi.
Yeah, I remember reading online about a beer that was like, they were going for like 1,000 IBUs or some crazy bullshit.
You can't even taste that.
You can't. I think there's a certain number where it hits a certain threshold where you actually can't taste it. I don't remember do you know what that magic number is off the top of your head?
I want to say it's anything over like, my gut is saying 100, but I want to say it's like higher. Like
it's got to be higher. It's got to be higher than that.
Like, when have you seen a beer that's 100?
I don't know. I
know there was a thing that there were like people were doing it for a while. This is some years ago, but I think I don't know. I think I want to say realistically probably 100.
I sure as fuck do not want to drink a beer.
100's a lot.
I don't want to drink a fucking 100 by IBU beer. I didn't, and I say this all the time, but I didn't really become an IPA drinker until I started working at the brewery at Optimism.
I'm still not. I mean, I have some that I really like and appreciate, but it's never my go-to. I don't walk into when I walk into a brewery, the first beers I look at aren't the IPAs. I want to look at like the stuff that's got more of a maltier profile, ambers or stouts, that sort of thing, and maybe a blonde ale or something here or there. But I don't typically beeline for the IPAs. Plus, my girlfriend's always gonna get one, so I just try hers.
That's fair. Yeah, and what I noticed too was when I first moved to Seattle. Seattle is a big IPA city from what I've
Absolutely.
noticed. I remember strolling into the grocery store one of the first days we were here, and I was in the beer aisle. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
There's like 60%, 70% IPAs up in this bitch. Yeah. I was like, I don't drink any of this.
No,
None of it.
It can be a struggle when you go to like a brewery and you're like, oh, I really want to check out their beer, and then their tap list is 70% IPAs, and you're like, oh, yes, I'll try one of these other couple of beers. It's maybe not, but I mean, some of the IPAs are doing good stuff, but a lot of it's kind of samey. That's why, like we were talking about before, I've just gotten into beers that use weird adjuncts. And so for anyone who's not a beer nerd, an adjunct is basically something that's added to the beer that's not like the hops, yeast, water or barley, or whatever they use for their malt. It's basically like, let's say they put raspberries in there, that's an adjunct. Let's say they put coffee, that's an adjunct, or vanilla bean, that's an adjunct. But I like the ones that get weird. There's that one I didn't want to try it. The guy that was talking to us about that had the like burger buns and fries.
I was like, yeah, what the fuck is that?
But he had a good point that it would probably come across as dry because all those end up being fermentable sugars. So,
oh, that's true. So you're getting that high alcohol content,
yeah,
and then
it's like not much sweetness from that. You're gonna get all dry,
right? It's
not
gonna
bitter,
be
but
really, really bitter. Yeah. So working at Optimism has certainly like broadened my horizons when it comes to beer too. And I was thinking about this.
Broadened my waistline.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
That's for fucking sure, my guy. But also, it in some ways makes me want to drink beer less. I think I drink less beer now that after working there for a while now. Yeah, at first I was drinking a lot more, right? Because I felt like compared to the lot of people that worked there,
yeah,
I needed to play catch up. I need to figure
stuff. The product.
Exactly. I had to at least be somewhat informed on what the hell we were selling people, so I could sell it better, I guess you could say.
Opinions and all.
Yeah, exactly. But after a few months, I kind of started to lull a little bit. Like, I don't drink near as much beer outside of work now. I drink probably more whiskey than anything now.
I've tried and wanted to be a whiskey drinker for a long time. I wanted to be a rum drinker for a long time.
I remember. I think last time you were over, I gave you some whiskey, and you were not a big fan.
I'm picky, I think, about my whiskey.
Yeah.
And there's whiskeys that I used to like that I don't really like anymore, but I want to still like. Like Jameson used to be my go-to, and now I'm like, I just switch. I hard switch to beer, man. I don't really do a lot of spirits anymore. Earlier today, I did
It's expensive.
That is 100% true. I mean, beer adds up too, because you get to the same point.
Yeah,
it depends on why you're drinking, I guess, is what it really adds up.
Yeah, but there's a literal liquor tax here in Washington, 20% on top of what you're buying your liquor for.
They don't apply that to beer?
No.
It's not like an alcohol tax?
No. So it's anything over 25%, I think. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so not wine, not
so you
beer,
might still be fine
liquor.
with your schnapps. You might be able to get some of those.
Maybe, or sake or soju.
Yeah. Yeah, I had earlier today, though, I had mixed some cold brew. I had this cask aged. Well, what they'd done is they'd taken... So I guess Guinness had done some barrel aging in some Jameson casks. And
really?
then they gave those casks back to Jameson. So basically they put this Jameson in stout barrels. And then they took
Jameson stout barrel.
Yeah, but they used Guinness stout. They used barrels that had Guinness in it and then put Jameson in it later and then bottled that. I bought it when I was in Ireland and brought it back. I think you can get it here, but I just bought it at like the duty-free store. It's like, well, I got to buy a bottle of Jameson.
Ireland.
I'm in Ireland, yeah, excuse me.
Yeah.
And did you yawn? Did you yawn and make me yawn? Is that what happened?
Did I?
I don't know.
That shit is definitely contagious.
I don't know, you did something. Your hand, I think, went over your mouth, and then I don't know if my brain interpreted it as yawning. It's like, my turn. Anyway.
Oh, boy. And so you bought the bottle of Jameson.
Yeah, but what I do is I make ice cubes out of cold brew, and then I'd put one in a glass and poured a little bit of Jameson over it and a little bit of cold brew, and there was some water, and kind of sipped on that. It was pretty good.
Oh,
but it was
fancy.
the Guinness, the what do they call it? Guinness Stout or something, or Jameson Stout.
I know what we're talking about. There's
Whatever.
this trendy thing now where they're doing like liquor with like
Yeah.
liquor IPA and shit like that.
Yeah.
It's like the weird.
Well, what they're
really
doing
weird.
is they've got these distilleries that are giving these barrels to breweries. The breweries are barrel aging beer in it, and then they're giving the barrels back to the distillery, and then the distillery's now throwing more
Liquor.
bourbon or whiskey or what have you in the barrels, and now you're getting like the previous spirit that was in there. I mean, there might not be much of that left, but then you're getting some of the flavor from the beer that was in the barrels kind of going into the new batch. And so they're kind of passing it back and forth. I don't know if they pass it back after that or if it's just kind of done. The oak can't take anymore, or if they just keep handing it back and forth. But I know that like they'll go, okay, we've aged whiskey in this, and then they go, okay, now we've aged beer in this, now we're gonna give it back to them, and they go, okay, well now we're gonna age more whiskey in it, but after the beer's been in there, it's gonna impact the flavor, slightly. I don't think it makes a huge difference, but I'm also not like a whiskey nerd, so it might.
Oh, I'm not either. I just know there's a couple of bourbons out there that I really enjoy. I'll have to have you try the bourbon I have in there before you leave. It's called Noah's Mill, and it's fantastic.
Have you tried anything from Westland?
No.
So Westland's just down in Soto. I've done a tour of their production, their distillery. Really good, man. That's how I learned what peat was. Like a peated whiskey or
like yeah, peaty.
Yeah, it's this weird
smoke
kind of thing that grows in like wetlands, and you can only collect a lot of time the areas that you can collect it are like protected. There's this whole thing, and they dry it down. It looks like a brick, and you can put that in. It's going to give it that smoky kind of slightly. I think smoky is probably the best way to describe it. Might be a little bit of umami in there.
Yeah, people call it peat smoke. So
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a peaty flavor. I like peated stuff, or like stuff that's like a blend of like a peated and like an unpeated spirit if I'm going to drink it. But it's something I still kind of struggle with because, when I was younger, I didn't used to drink whiskey and things just because of the flavor. I thought I did. I wanted to like it. And I just never acquired the taste buds for it. And
it wasn't until much later, like
the nuance was lost on me.
Yeah, I think afterwards I just took an interest in it. I think what part of it was Blade Runner actually.
Really?
Yeah, the parts where
Yakuza.
No. Well, that too. That too. It definitely became a habit.
You had those glasses, right?
I do. Not here, but like I have them. They're back home.
Yeah.
But yeah, Yakuza was definitely a part of it. When I was finally of drinking age, I saw Blade Runner in the part where he's drinking Johnny Walker.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try Johnny Walker just out of sheer curiosity. Whatever. Yeah. Tried something. I was like, okay, this is pretty good.
Okay,
I like this. And so,
it's a whiskey.
It's a Scotch.
A Scotch.
It is a Scotch. Yes. Fun.
A Scotch from Scotland. Scotch.
Yes.
Okay.
Fun fact: they made a special edition Johnny Walker bottle in the shape of name Harrison Ford's name and Deckard's bottle of Johnny Walker in Blade Runner. They made a model of it for the promotion of 2049 when that came out.
2049.
Yeah, so you could buy a bottle of Johnny Walker Black.
Man, 2049 was so good.
Yeah, 2049 is so good.
I need to go back and rewatch. I saw it in IMAX, and the whole thing, it had the IMAX aspect ratio, the full screen, the entire film. It was amazing.
That's what I saw it opening night in IMAX.
Yeah, and I had
good.
I had recently shown my girlfriend Blade Runner. There we go. She liked it, so I'm.
Oh, she did like it.
She did like it.
That's good.
She said, "That was good."
So does that mean she liked it?
It means she liked it, and I think she's mostly on board for Ridley Scott because she has a similar thing about Alien. We were talking about Alien, and I was like, "Oh, no," and she's, "That was good." And I'm like, "Okay, I know enough to know that means we can watch the sequel."
No,
so,
it was so like you didn't have the whole conversation about like the plot and the themes and all that.
No, there was, there's a word for that, or a phrase. It's a couple of words, I think, and I used to know it. I learned it from that one film class I had in community college, which they talked about. Like that's what I learned what the word juxtapose meant, and there's a word that basically when you're critically talking about a film. There's a word for that. And
not exposition.
No. There's no way we're gonna remember it.
No.
It's this is pretentious, but it's obscure, and I've forgotten it. That's how obscure it is because I never talk about it. But I remember when I first learned the phrase, it was like, oh no, when you walk out of a movie and you're talking about it with your friends, this is what it's called, and it's just talking about like a critical review of a movie. There's a phrase for it, but anyway, no, we don't really get a lot of that. But I think she absorbs content different. I think that, I just talk about everything. I'm a real stream of consciousness kind of guy. So I just run my mouth a lot. And she, I think, thinks about what she's going to say and kind of can distill things down to like the important part.
Yeah.
Of like the statement.
She's super measured about what she says.
Yeah. No, which makes sense. But I think she can kind of look at something and just be like, no, it's good. Then sometimes there'll be maybe a little more. But
I heard about, I don't know the name of the podcast, but I'd heard about another podcast that my roommate was telling me about, and it made me think of you.
Oh, yeah?
And it's a podcast where these two girls watch all the movies their boyfriends tell them to watch.
I just recently heard an ad for this. I've not listened to it, but what was I listening to? I don't know if I think it was my brother and me, I think ran an ad at the end of their episode for this podcast, and I was like, I should check this out.
I think that's where he heard about it. Actually,
I've not listened to it, but I don't remember. I don't recall the title, but I'm intrigued.
I was like, dude, this
if it
is
gives
like
me insight.
is one of these girls Carrie?
Yeah. So part of me is I'm intrigued.
Yeah. So basically, gosh. I love those movies, though. I think that's what makes a standout movie for me. A lot of the movies that are like some of my favorite movies.
What's your favorite movie?
Fuck, you really?
I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Okay, here we go. It doesn't have to be the singular favorite, but like we'll just say like a top 5. We're gonna go 5. Any one of the top 5, because that way you don't have to try and order them.
Gotcha. Well, let me finish my thought here.
Yes.
So yeah, the movies, some of my favorite movies are definitely those ones that like whoever you go and see it with or whoever has seen it, you can sit there and talk about that movie for hours. Because there's just so much to unpack to a film. Like Interstellar was one of those movies for me. Is definitely in my top 5, I think.
Don't let me leave, Murph. Don't let me leave, Murph.
And I know, like, it's not everyone's favorite movie, but I think the concepts that it deals with, and I think the way that they portray space is really cool. And I think the ultimate reality they talk about is very realistic and could happen.
I mean, it's hard to demonstrate the fourth dimension in a 2D. Fifth dimension.
I think it's a fifth dimension. Yeah, in that movie.
Well, then what's the fourth?
The fourth dimension is basically a shape, like a 3D shape within a shape.
Okay. All right. Well, fifth. Anyway, my point is, even the fourth or fifth, it's hard to show that demonstrably in a 2D medium. I think that's where the film kind of struggles.
Yeah.
Because you have to give a 2D representation of like a 5D thing, which we can't conceptualize.
Right. Well, yeah, I think part of it is just like, it's definitely that. And so the film definitely hits that point where they have to start taking artistic liberties.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's no other way to go.
Right.
To do it.
Right. I mean, they're writing a story, right?
Yeah.
Even though the movie is heavily based in science, they try to be
the time stuff, getting closer to a black hole and how years pass faster. It's
right.
The girl I was dating at the time when we saw that movie did a real deep dive in it. She was so fascinated with it.
Yeah.
She got to a point where she could wrap her head around it. And I got to a point where I could like sort of wrap my head around it, but I still didn't really know what it meant. But I think I've only seen it once, the one time I saw it in theaters, but I feel like if I watched it.
I think I also saw that in IMAX. I don't remember though.
It was shot. I think some of it was shot on IMAX.
No, I didn't get to fucking see it in IMAX. I was really upset because I didn't get to see it in IMAX.
Christopher Nolan was already messing around with IMAX stuff because he had started using those cameras with like The Dark Knight.
Gotcha.
So he had done them since. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if they did at least some of the scenes with IMAX cameras.
They did, because if you watch the film and I don't want to dive too deep because I know this isn't like
that could be a whole podcast about Interstellar. There's a lot of depth there.
I actually did listen to an entire podcast about Interstellar.
I'm not surprised. Did it have Neil deGrasse Tyson on it?
No, it was Colin Moriarty's podcast. Yeah,
okay.
Like him and his brother do a nostalgia podcast, basically is what they call it. But they did an entire episode about Interstellar, and like,
not surprised.
Yeah,
there's a lot to unpack.
There is.
The movie's got layers, man.
It totally does. But I kind of forgot. No, yeah. So it was shot in IMAX, but only certain scenes were fully IMAX. Which,
that's how most things used to be.
Yeah, which is kind of annoying because if you watch like the Blu-ray of the film, it's constantly shifting between full screen and letterbox.
So that's where like Dark Knight does it too. But if you got a good editor, you can kind of cut and good director obviously as well. Because there's some that I've seen it. Because I'll notice on my TV, because it'll go like CinemaScope, you get the black bars, and it'll kind of go 16:9. Because IMAX it's more than just 16:9, which is, what most TVs are, like 1080p, all that.
Right.
Even the standard 4K is still in a 16:9 aspect ratio. But IMAX is closer to like 16:10. I don't know what the actual aspect ratio is.
I think that's right, actually. I think 16:10 is.
So it'll fill it up more vertically.
Right.
And like all of Blade Runner 2049, if you saw that in like an actual IMAX theater, like what we got here in Seattle, at the Pacific Science Center, that the entire movie was in that. Same with Infinity War and I think Endgame were both done entirely on IMAX cameras as well. Because regular cameras, whether it's like a Panasonic or whatever they're shooting on, Red, Arri or Ari or whatever, depending on the cameras they shoot it on, it's going to affect the aspect ratio of it. But you can see, like, I know Dark Knight does it too, where there will be certain scenes where if you have a 16:9 TV, you'll have CinemaScope, which I don't know the exact aspect ratio for that. It's like something by something by something. But it'll have, even on 16:9, your standard 1080 TV, you'll have black bars. But then there'll be certain scenes, which are the ones shot on IMAX cameras, will fill it up all the way. It's full 16:9. And then it'll cut back. But it does it so well. Like, they do it at the right point and the edit that the first couple times I never noticed. And so I think Interstellar probably does the same thing. But in a theater, it's weird because I know Batman versus Superman did the same thing where most it was this and then it would fill up all of a sudden and then the fidelity would just get so high and you'd be like, oh man, I can see their pores.
Wow.
And then it would, go back to your standard. And it is jarring a little bit in theaters because then like, Batman, Superman both end up in the same place at the same time. And then it fills up the whole screen. You're like, shit's about to go down.
Oh, shit.
Because, so it can also work as like a preface for like, oh, it's about to get real.
Yeah.
But I like it now when you have movies that actually have the budget where they can do the whole thing in IMAX cameras. There's not a lot of those. I forgot which one. It was one of the Star Wars or if it was one of the Avengers. One of those movies broke an IMAX camera, which is like, so movie productions don't buy the camera.
No, they rent them,
They
right?
rent them, right? And so they do the same thing with these IMAX cameras. And these things are like hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'm assuming. Maybe they're less. I know like an Arri can be, that's like a $30,000 camera or something like an Alexa, or it used to be, like what they shot Drive on. The lenses are still the most expensive part. They'll always be the most expensive part of any camera because the technology in the lens doesn't change. It's just light through glass, essentially, just really refined,
nice glass.
Nice. Do not scratch that glass.
Like imperfection-free glass, essentially.
Yes. And so, but someone broke. I don't know if it was J.J. Abrams or someone. It was one of these directors who uses IMAX cameras. They broke one of these cameras, and I remember seeing the article about it. And like, the film nerd in me, the cinematographer in me was like, "Oh my god." Just like,
how?
I can't even imagine being able to use one of these cameras, much less working on a movie where you can break one of these cameras and then be like, oops. It's like, no, that would be the end of my career forever. You'll never work in this town again. It'd be one of those. These cameras are nuts. And so to see a whole movie that's shot on it, man, to see it in IMAX, I only really now like to go because there's no. I love assigned seating in a theater.
Yeah. It makes it. You don't have to worry about getting into the theater early and getting good seats. Yeah.
And I'm real particular about the seats I like to sit in.
Yeah. Are you a big like center row,
Center of the
slightly
theater.
back.
Center of the theater is the perfect. I now go slightly back because of Carrie, because she'll get motion sickness if we're a little too close to the screen. So I'll go a couple aisles back. But my heart of hearts is the very center of the theater is the prime seat.
Well, yeah, you get the perfect center of the
It's
audio
everything.
and the viewing angle.
But a little bit back's never hurt my feelings. Even in the very back, I just don't want to sit too close, because when you sit too close, you got to look left, you got to look right. There's a lot of like audience, you got to do a lot to just catch up with the film. But if you're in the back, you can see it all. But if you're too far back, then you might as well just watch it at home. I got a big 4K TV at home. I might as well sit there and watch it. And
right, exactly.
so I like the middle. I want to do like where I got to tilt my head just slightly.
Just slightly.
Like that's the perfect amount. When I just got to do like, like a couple centimeters to the right, couple centimeters to the left to see everything.
Right.
That's where I like to be when I see a movie.
Yeah, it's been a minute since I've seen a movie. Not like too long, but what was the last? I don't even remember what the last movie
Have you
was.
gone to the IMAX at the Pacific Science Center?
No, I haven't. It sounds like I should.
Dude, it's got like two, I don't know if I think it's dual 8K projectors.
Holy shit.
It's like when they put these in, it wasn't just like one of the only ones in the country. It was like one of like 6 in the world.
Wow.
It was, and I don't know, they probably have more now.
I mean, but they show like.
But you have IMAX, and then other theaters. Like, let's say you go to AMC and you see an IMAX movie. People who are like real snobs about it call that LIMAX, like LIE, because they're like, it's not true IMAX format. And so to see one there, especially when you get one of these movies like Blade Runner or like Avengers, where it fills up the entire screen, it's something else, man. Visually, it's like a visual orgasm. It's amazing. It's sex for your eyes.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, just to sit there, even if you're stone sober, sitting there looking at this screen, it's humbling. It's like the picture quality. Just Blade Runner was the best. Blade Runner is the best. I have my ticket stub for Blade Runner. I don't really.
I think I have mine too,
because that is the best movie I've seen in IMAX that really like demonstrably showed this is what we can do. And I'll never be able to see that movie that way again, because I'm never going to own an IMAX theater in my life. I'm never going to be a millionaire. And so I can buy it on 4K UHD, watch it on my TV. Not the same, because that's still constricted to 16:9. This watching it on that screen in that full like floor to ceiling, it's
VR, man. VR is going to be your answer.
Honestly, when it gets high, so I haven't tried the new the new Vive or new Oculus or any of that stuff. But yeah, potentially that could be the only other way you could do it outside of going to one of these theaters.
Yeah, that would be the cost-effective way to do it.
Sometimes IMAX will do like a re-release. Like, I guess if it's like a slow movie season, and we go, come see this. I know Cinerama does it. Like, they just did yesterday and so Sunday, Monday, they just did Apocalypse Now. They had rescanned the film and played it. I wanted to go, but then we had our like.
I've never seen
stuff.
Apocalypse Now.
Oh my God. You, me, and Dave, we're going to get together. Dave said he's never seen it. We're going to get together. We're going to watch Apocalypse Now. We got so many. We're creating a list.
Yep.
I
haven't been writing these down. Fuck.
I got them. I got them all up here.
Yeah,
Just ask me later.
I know you do. So I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
I want to ask you a question. So as a person who is you call yourself a cinephile, right?
Absolutely.
So of course you watch a ton of movies at home.
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain to me why the fuck mixing is so bad on audio on home, like movies you watch at home?
No. Short answer is no. I can't tell you.
No insight whatsoever?
No, the little bit I can tell you is that a lot of stuff I think is mixed. Honestly, I think now more than ever, stuff is mixed for home. It's not really mixed for theaters anymore. I think they do a theater mix, obviously, because in a lot of the time that theater mix is the same thing. It's going to make it to Blu-ray, like your Dolby Atmos, your 5.1. Your 7.1 is probably going to be mostly simulated anyway. Because you got to think, when you're a sound designer, you have to decide. When you're a sound designer, you have to decide what's going to each of these speakers and how much of it's going where. You've got a car driving from right to left of the screen, right? Mm-hmm. You're doing surround sound now. Let's say it's going to go at an angle. It's going from, 45 degrees to 90 degrees from the character. you have to now go, okay, well, this car sound's going to be in this speaker, your front right. Now it's a little bit your center. Now it's going to be your left. Now it's going to be your back left. And then it's going to fade out. They have to do it for every single sound effect if they want to, if they really want to get in depth with their sound design. Now, maybe there's a simpler way. I'm viewing it from more of like an indie. Like if I was going to sit down at a computer, that's how I would do it. Now, they may have some really fancy ways of doing it now.
Yeah, some
which
crazy
they can kind of
software.
go, okay, yeah, they can maybe draw a line and just go, hey, this is the way the sound's going, just do it. And it just does it. I don't know. I don't work in sound. I can tell you about working with actors and moving a scene around and filming stuff.
That's fair.
Yeah. But that's the way I would do it. And that's the way I think at some point in time, that's the way they had to do it. At least when surround stuff started becoming standard before it was fully standardized.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of work. You can do that in a theater. And I think that, when you sit in a theater, you can hear that sound. But a lot of time, most people are watching movies on their iPads. They got stereo headphones. They're watching them at home. If they're listening to their iPad or their phone, that's a mono. I guess you can have a stereo mix, and some fancy phones will have like 2 channels, but you're not even at 2.1. And so, what it really boils down to is like, what's the effort? Now you think that they could use the OG mix, whatever their 7.1 or their 5.1 or whatever they're using for their theater stuff.
Right.
I think they would just transfer, and a lot of it does. But the short answer, I don't fucking know.
Well,
I'm just saying it's a lot of work, but now that I'm thinking about it, now that I'm talking about it, that work's done. Because you sit in a movie theater, especially in IMAX or something, if they've already done that mix for IMAX, they can just give that mix, because it's all digital stuff now anyway. They can give that to theaters and they can just run that same exact mix, because most theaters are equipped to do at least 5.1.
Right.
So,
well, yeah, and the reason why I asked is because
is it like a specific movie you're thinking of?
Interstellar is a great fucking example. I mean,
it had a bounce sound mix.
Really bad. Like, even in theaters, I remember people saying like the audio mix was bad. But when
really,
especially when you watch it at home, watch it again. Just listening to it, because it's like 1 second the fucking dialogue is so quiet you can barely make out what the fuck they're saying. And then the next second, it's just like, huge booming sounds. So here you are, like, I mean, because
now have you watched it on multiple sound systems? Because this might just be like a configuration thing.
No, I have.
Okay.
I have. I've watched it on headphones. I've watched it in a theater, and I've watched it on some basic computer speakers that are hooked up to my TV.
Now in the theater, do you remember the sound mix being like that? Do you remember being like, oh, it's quiet?
I remember.
Now, I don't remember.
I remember it certainly being quieter on the dialogue part of it. Now, and this was something that people were even talking about on Reddit and shit like that back in the day.
Might have been an intentional sound design choice thing.
Maybe.
Like an artistic liberty.
Even in other movies in general, right? Like, it's so fucking frustrating when you're sitting there, watching a movie on your TV, and then like the dog is like, and then the music rolls and it's like, and it's like, and it's just like you have to sit there and fuck with the volume on your TV, the whole movie.
I still have to do that. Now, one workaround at least is there's a thing like I have a lot of movies on my computer, and then I have my computer hooked up to my TV through an HDMI port, and on that sometimes there's sound. I don't know if it's loudness equalization, I think Windows calls it, and it's a setting you can turn on.
Oh, right.
And that kind of is designed to mitigate that, to balance out, so everything's kind of got the same levels.
Tries to stay even, yeah.
Yeah, and works wonders, especially if you found that dialogue's kind of quiet. That works pretty well, at least if you're watching a movie on your computer. Because I found that a lot, especially with like 90s movies. Now, one thing I found is if you have the output set to something that you're not necessarily equipped to handle or isn't calibrated correctly. So let's say you have a 5.1 setup and you got 5 speakers, you got your front left, front right, center, back left, back right.
Right, 5.1. Yeah.
So you got your 5.1, but then you're listening to a stereo mix of a movie. That's going to affect your sound.
Right, of course.
Now, let's say you've got stereo speakers, but you're playing the 5.1 channel audio.
Right, that's going to mess with stuff.
That's going to affect it. You see what I make sure it kind of matches, And so I think that can play a role along with So, your personal setup, and then what setting, especially if you're doing something through like a PlayStation 4, you got to make sure if you're on like linear PCM, whether you're on Dolby,
Right.
and all that is gonna affect it. And then maybe the way that handshakes and talks to like your TV and kind of what sound it's putting out, depending on where your sound's coming out. A lot of it tends to be a calibration issue. At least with PC, you can kind of use something like equalization. But if it sounded like that in the theater, which is where this stuff is like originally mixed for, then it sounds like a sound design choice, not necessarily a problem. Which you'd have to ask, Christopher Nolan why it sounds that way, because I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
But I think as far as like a home system, it could be the way your system's calibrated. It could be which
more
audio
variables
track
there.
you're listening. Yeah. The more variables, and now with sound, there's you've got DTS:X, DTS, Atmos, regular stereo, 2.1, 5.1, some of these 7.1. Like all these different things that it can go through in the way that sound's output. And if you don't have it matched up correctly, it's going to sound weird. And then also it depends on like the quality of your speakers. So a lot of things can change as variables. Headphones are really good. There's a reason why people use headphones in studios and in sound design.
Honestly,
mixing,
some of the best movie watching experiences I've had are just using my headphones.
Yeah, using a good monitor, and monitor speakers. If you're using speakers, if you really want to test something, that's a good way to do it. But, just like visual stuff, I learned recently I was trying to calibrate my TV and make it, I'm always calibrating my TV.
Yeah,
I try to carry notes. I'll pause something and then I'll be, we did this with Seven Samurai. I was like,
for a black and white fucking movie.
Yeah, how are these black levels?
From like 70 years ago.
I get so obsessed. And then I stopped reading forums because everyone's got their own opinions. And most of the time, a lot of the time they're wrong.
Of course they are,
because it's the way that because a lot of the time a visual quality of something can be kind of subjective. Now there's the most objective way is if I had the director in the room with me or the editor and go, is this how it's supposed to look? And let's say they had pristine memory recall and they could go, yes, this is what I mixed it to look like. Then I know I was golden. But at the end of the day, when you're calibrating your stuff, you want to make sure your blacks aren't too black, your whites aren't blown out, and that it looks how you like it to look. Because a lot of time all of our TVs are different, and the way the panels are designed, they're all going to be slightly different from one to the next, just from little tiny imperfections. And so you kind of have to fill out your settings to where they look what you find the most visually pleasing. Now, I recently started using, like you do, the Netflix and Amazon Prime built into my TV instead of using my PlayStation 4.
Yeah.
Because the calibration settings were more accurate to use what was built into the TV, especially with Amazon. Whereas if you stream Amazon on your computer or on your PlayStation 4, I don't know about Xbox One X or anything, but at least on those two, you're not going to be able to get true 4K video. You have to do it like through your TV because for some reason it's like, I don't know if it's some weird licensing thing or whatever. You're just not going to get it. It's always going to do 1080 and it's going to throw it off because sometimes it's going to think it's in an HDR signal. It's not in HDR. It's a whole thing. And I could be wrong, but from the research I've done, the best bet is just play it through the TV. Same with Netflix. You can calibrate it more. And I finally got them to where I started going through this with Nicholas Winding Refn's Too Old to Die Young, and that and a combination of when calibrating like my Netflix settings with Stranger Things season 2, I would go through like frame by frame and kind of check stuff, and I'd look how it looked on this, looked how it looked on that, and just kind of get my stuff organized where it wasn't too grainy, it wasn't too over smooth, to kind of get it where it needs to be, your black levels, your color correction. I got it dialed in now. Finally.
That's good.
I say this, give me 3 months. I'm going to watch something else and be like, I think I'm supposed to be able to see what's in that shadow there. I think the director's trying to show us something and I fucked up my settings so I can't see it. I just don't want to miss something. I want it to be viewed the way it was intended to be viewed. But the thing is, a lot of stuff, especially like anything Nicholas Winding Refn does, which is also something like I really can relate to, he likes a very dark frame. Everything looks like it's just been dimmed down. but that's by design. But the thing is, when you're viewing something and you haven't really calibrated to anything else, and you're watching it like, oh, my settings are all off, it's too dark. When you don't realize like someone has colored each of these films or shows separately. You know, they're not all playing by the same rules. There's no basically gamma. I think 2.2 is the standard, but outside of that, it's fair game. How dark or bright you want a scene to be, what you want to pop, what you want to be in shadows, and it can change from cut to cut.
Sure.
And so when calibrating a TV, that's really tricky. So honestly, there's like calibration sites you can use and tools you can use, but you got to like either really know what you're doing or pay someone to do it to get your TV right. And then you can kind of relax and just let it go. But there's certain things, just like a sound system. I think that you put a car stereo in, right? And you listen to mostly hip hop, or you listen to mostly black metal, or you listen to a lot of punk, you know, all of these, if majoritively what you're listening to, you're going to want to adjust your levels. You're going to
equalize
your high pass filters, your low pass filters. You're going to want to adjust that, your loudness separately, depending on mostly what you're listening to. Cause like I could have my stuff all calibrated, mostly punk. I throw on hip hop. It might sound like ass. You know, there's no like one size fits all. TVs aren't so dissimilar.
And when you get to the audio argument, it turns into that whole thing of like equalizing versus audiophilia. If you're listening to like a good set of speakers or a good pair of headphones, some people would argue that you want to go flat on everything because you want to get the natural sound of what you're listening. And
I've come around to that. I used to do, when I did a lot of equalizers, I would do the V. You know, low mids, high bass, high treble.
And I say you listen to shit the way you want to listen to it. I'm not going to tell anyone like, hey, if you're an audiophile, listen to shit flat. Yeah. But
flat, you at least get like how the OG mix sounded.
Right, how your headphones should sound.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, but in headphones like TVs, from unit to unit, and then also from like version to version, depending on what you're using, it's all going to be a little different. So you kind of got to calibrate. At the end of the day, do what sounds good to you. Same with the TV. Do what looks good to you. If you like your black super deep black and your bright super bright, if that's appealing to you, set your TV like that. Fuck how it was intended to be viewed. Just do what looks good for you. And it took me a very long time to embrace that. And I still really struggle with it because I want to do that, but I also want to see what the director intended for me to see.
Right.
So it's like a 90-10 mix. 90% what the director wants me to see, and a little bit 10% to kind of tweak things like, well, I know I like it to look a little like this.
Right. You know. Yeah. No, I spent way too much time messing with all that stuff because I was playing like some game in HDR, and I was like, this doesn't look quite right. So I was like looking online for like the exact model of my TV.
Was it Red Dead 2? Because its HDR was screwed up for the first.
No, it was Sekiro months. Actually.
Okay.
Sekiro. And so I was like looking online for like the exact model of my TV and like what the settings should be put at, and like everyone had 5 million different fucking opinions. They're like, this looks too warm. This looks too cold. This doesn't look bright enough. This looks washed out. Like I couldn't find
in those threads. There's only like one person who knows what the fuck they're talking about, and it's so hard to filter that out.
Dude,
because
it's so hard
for that one person who really is like professionally knows what they're doing.
Sure.
There's 150 other people who don't know.
Yeah.
And they like their stuff all crazy. You switch to, they recommend settings and you change it to that, and you're like, this is how you watch everything? It's insane.
Yeah, it is crazy. Yeah. And so it's like at some point I just hit a point. I was like, you know what? This looks fine. I'm gonna keep fucking. I'm gonna keep fucking with it if I don't stop now, and it's never gonna end. But to get back to your earlier question, because I know we've kind of like gone off on a pretty big tangent here. You asked me like what my top 5 movies were.
No, a top 5.
Because
I didn't want you to limit. I didn't want to say your favorite movie because I don't have a singular favorite movie. I think that's it's such a difficult question. You could spend a week trying to think about the answer.
Like, are you saying 5 movies that are my top 5?
A single movie out of your top 5.
A single movie out of my top 5.
We don't have to say like maybe it's your third favorite movie, maybe it's your first, but you don't have to focus on where it is in that line.
Oh, no. So so you only want one movie out of those 5?
Just one movie out of those 5.
Well, now you're making me like still making me choose.
The most favorite. I'm just what comes to mind.
Lord of the Rings.
Okay, which one?
All of them. You can't just pick one.
I mean, I think Fellowships and Two Towers are better than Return of the King.
I mean, I don't know.
So I could
like
choose
when I
those two.
watch
If I
them,
really had to choose, if I want an action flick, I'm going to do Two Towers. If I want an introduction to a trilogy, I'm going to do Fellowship.
well, I never ever watch those movies out of order. When I watch them, like they're watching them in order, and I treat it as one giant event. Like it's like a series. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's
Well,
like
what about it? Why? Well, we'll treat it like it's one 9-hour movie. Why?
12-hour if you watch extended editions.
Okay, 12 hours. One 12-hour movie.
10, 11, 12-hour. But who's keeping track?
An entire season of a show.
Yeah, yeah. So wait, what is it about those movies? You ask?
Yeah.
I think the common thread that you'll find with all of or a lot of my favorite movies, is that there's a lot of nostalgia. Definitely, like
Okay.
it's definitely part of it.
Well, why'd you like it when it came out then?
Why did I like it when it came out?
Yeah.
Because I liked the idea of fantasy. Like I was always interested in fantasy as a kid. I can't remember.
Did you read the books before?
No.
Okay.
No, I was 5 when I saw Fellowship, dude.
Oh
I could,
God.
yeah.
Such a baby.
I was 5, and so
That's so weird to me.
Yeah.
'Cause I think I was in like, when did Fellowship come out?
2001.
How old would that have made me?
I don't know.
Now we're gonna have an awkward silence. Which I think about.
No.
2 years 90. So I was 2 in 1990. So you throw 10 years.
No, you were like
on that,
11,
12.
right?
I was 13. So I was a
13.
teenager, I guess. I was in peak. I was like, we got people cutting orcs' heads off. Like I was probably viewing it differently. I was like, this is metal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
It was the action stuff that I was super into.
So the earliest memory I have with Lord of the, well, I'm trying to think. So, of course, I was shown video games and stuff like that. When I was like 4 years old, I think is when I got my PlayStation, and that's when I became interested in fantasy worlds and stuff like that. And my uncle got me. My uncle's in charge of a lot of it.
Was the PlayStation your first console?
Yes.
Cool.
It was a hand-me-down PlayStation from my uncle, and I had games like Breath of Fire 3 was one of the first fucking games I ever owned.
Okay.
Which a JRPG for a 4-year-old, like holy shit, that was a lot. And Spyro, of course.
Oh yeah.
Spyro and Scooby Doo was like my shit. But then there was that. Then it was a comment, and then my uncle had showed me D&D. She introduced me to D&D when I was like super young.
Oh nice.
Still, I was way too young to even have a grasp on it. But all I remember is telling him I want to play a dude with a fucking huge sword. Just big giant sword. And so there was that, and then I remember seeing a trailer for Lord of the Rings. And it was this. I remember in the trailer it was a cut of the scene in Rivendell where they're having the meeting with the Fellowship for the first time, and everyone, and Frodo's like, I will take the ring to Mordor, and and then Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli you have my sword and my bow and my axe. And I was like, and me, 5-year-old brain was like, what did this guy borrow someone's axe, sword, and bow and just didn't give it back? Is that what this whole movie's about? He's got to give it back. And so I was like, wait, so did he just rent these axes out or whatever, just never return them? But then I saw the movie and I was like, holy shit, this is some my young kid brain was like, what the fuck, dude? This blew my mind.
So you're 5.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So I was super young when I saw that. I was honestly, I was probably more like 6 by the time I saw it, because I didn't see Fellowship in theaters. I saw it VHS first. I did see Two Towers in theaters.
Okay.
And I did see Return of the King in theaters.
I will always associate the song Requiem for a Dream from the movie Requiem for a Dream. I don't know if it was Clint Mansell who the composer was on it, but if you heard the song, you'd recognize it was in the Two Towers trailer.
As soon as I heard it, I would know it.
Everyone lost their mind about the song because it was so good, but no one had seen Requiem for a Dream, which had I think Marlon Wayans and Jared Leto was about. Have you seen Requiem for a Dream?
No.
It's about heroin addiction. It's a pretty dark movie.
I've heard about it.
It's good. It's great, but it's also it's heavy.
Shit.
But they have a song in it, and they reused that song for the Two Towers trailer, which really got me into it. I remember that movie and that trailer was around the same time that Hitman 2 came out. And I got that for PlayStation 2. And I was listening to that song a lot and playing a lot of Hitman 2. And sometimes would overlap them. It was pretty intense.
That's pretty crazy, man.
Yeah.
Requiem for a Dream. So I didn't know there was a song called that because, like, when I think Lord of the Rings soundtrack, which obviously by extension is one of my favorite movie soundtracks of all time.
You should talk to Colin about this.
Yeah. Like,
dude, he used to put it on at work all the time.
Oh,
like,
really?
He would straight up put on the Lord of the Rings. I think he probably still listens to it in his headphones when he's like brewing.
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I didn't know he was a huge
soundtrack.
Lord of the Rings nut. I did not know that.
Also loves the Mamma Mia soundtrack. Oh, yeah.
Stark contrast.
Yeah. He's a complex guy.
When I think of Lord of the Rings, I instantly think of the Hobbiton, like the Shire theme.
Okay.
When Gandalf was rolling in on his cart with the cart full of fireworks at the beginning of Fellowship, and Frodo was like, "All right, keep your secrets." And, yeah, that song.
He'll whistle that. I'm surprised you haven't heard him. He will whistle those songs.
No, I haven't heard it.
Oh yeah.
But my favorite song on all of the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, Riders of Rohan, from To the Two Towers.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Dude.
That's pretty good.
Oh, yeah. I fucking love it. It gives me chills just thinking about it. Just the way that I was like, and that song honestly got me into classical music. I was like, holy fuck, this is what cellos can do. And like horns and shit. So those movies, very strongly nostalgic for me, have a lot of emotional power over me, which is why like I was like, oh my god, The Hobbit's happening, I have to go see it. And then they were disappointing.
I know, and then you saw
well, the first movie was good, and then the second two was bad.
To the third one. I've not seen the third one sober. I don't know that I can.
Yeah.
Now, Topher Grace apparently did a recut where he cut all three of them together. He did the same thing with the prequel Star Wars trilogy. Cut them together.
Topher Grace of all people?
Topher Grace. He has a really good podcast too called Minor Adventures with Topher Grace. I just listened to one today where he had Nick Kroll on, and they were talking about like he basically creates a task that they need to do. So one episode he had Pete Holmes, and it was like and he has someone who specializes in something on as the along with the guest, him and Pete Holmes had to come up with a language together. So this was the guy who came up with so some of the stuff in Lord of the Rings, like Dothraki, was already established in the books, but no one knew how.
Dothraki.
No one knew how the language in Lord. Have you watched Lord of the Rings or not Lord of the Rings?
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
I was gonna say, I was like with Dothraki. That's Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
bro.
yeah, Game of Thrones. So he worked for HBO, kind of like creating what this language sounds like, how people use it, and then kind of like everything in between, because they didn't really know how to represent it on screen, just strictly based on the book. Because in the books, people would just say, "Oh, in Dothraki, she said," and then it would just say it in English.
Right. They didn't develop it into a full-blown language like Elvish and Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, there would be little things here and there, but not like the whole thing. And so he kind of had to take what he was given and create this whole thing. Anyway, so he like had Pete Holmes on, and they made this language. And today I listened with Nick Kroll, where it was about memorization. And they had a guy on he had the world record for like, he could memorize a deck of cards. You could shuffle a deck of cards, let him flip through it real quick, and then give him a fresh deck of cards, and you could put it in the same exact order. He can walk into a room and talk to 200 people, and then stand in front of the room and tell everyone their name. Like he's like, no, my memory's not better. He basically goes into the technique, but like it's Topher Grace and Nick Kroll going over it, so it's going to be funny by default. Just like when his comedians and other movie stars on and stuff,
sure.
And but the guests never knows what they're going to be working on. Like he did, who was it with? It wasn't, so him and Pete Holmes were coming up with a language, but he had someone else on where they had to learn telemarketing. Oh, Paul Scheer. He had Paul Scheer on about telemarketing, and they actually cold called people, like trying to sell them a product.
Holy shit.
It's pretty funny. It's Minor Adventures with Topher Grace. How did I get on this?
We were talking about Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, language.
He did a recut, Topher Grace.
He also edits. So that's something Topher Grace does of that 70s show fame. He will go through...
And also played Venom in Spider-Man 3.
He did play Venom in Spider-Man. I think he tries to forget about that.
We don't talk about Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, we don't talk about Spider-Man 3. He did a recut of the prequel trilogy, and I think that leaked online. I think you can maybe find that. But he said he and a friend had recut the Hobbit movies into one movie. Because he's like, look, you had 3 Lord of the Rings books. They made them into 3 movies. The Hobbit was 1 book. They made it into 3 movies. He's like, there's a lot of extra shit there you don't need. He's like, so we cut it down, me and my buddy, because he just did this as a hobby. But I've tried. I cannot find it because I want to find it and I want to watch that version. But I don't think they leaked it out online anywhere. I think for fear of, retaliation of copyright stuff. Because now that he's talked about, oh, I did this, if it leaks, then they're going to be able to be like, well, you leaked it. And then, who made it? It wasn't Warner Brothers. It was
Warner Brothers.
It was Warner Brothers?
Yeah.
Well, now they're going to know who
they published it anyway.
Yeah. Distribute
it. Yeah, however you say that.
They're going to know who to sue. And so I think that's,
right.
He said, oh, it'll never see the light of day. But like, I did it. And now I just want to watch that cut because, man, they're not great.
No,
the Hobbits. The original trilogy is good.
I would argue that the first Hobbit movie is fine and actually pretty good.
The entire thing, like the full thing.
Like the whole first Hobbit movie?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it still ran a little long. I feel like the first 2 could have been combined into one.
Yeah, I think so too, but for the most part, I think that the first movie is pretty much fine. The second and third movie is where I start to take issue. And there are actual real reasons, production reasons why those 2 movies were so fucking terrible.
Well, even the first one, because you had
there was definitely issues in the first one. I'm not going to say there wasn't.
It was like Guillermo del Toro was working on it at first.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Then they kind of pulled him because Peter Jackson was saying, no, I'm not going to do it. And they're like, oh, we're going to have Guillermo do it. Then Peter Jackson shows up and they're like, okay, Guillermo, you're kind of fired. And Peter Jackson, you're now doing it. And then he's like, I don't like anything Guillermo did, so I'm going to start over. And it's just this, just sound like a shit. So those people worked on that for 2 years.
Yeah. So basically the story goes is I watched an entire 3-part, hour-and-a-half long series on why the Hobbit movies are bad.
Yeah. Who did it?
It was Lindsay something or other. She's a YouTuber.
Uh-huh.
Definitely look it up. You'll find it because the SEO on it's really good. It's a popular video series.
Okay.
And so basically there was a lot more shit that went into those movies that made them even worse than I could have possibly imagined. Mm-hmm. And so the long short of it is so the second and third movies, when those movies were in production, we'd originally heard that it was going to be 2 movies and that's it. Mm-hmm. Right.
That's what it should have been.
I agree. And so Guillermo del Toro was on production of the film, ended up falling off, and I can't remember the exact reason why. He wasn't fired. I think he just didn't want to do it.
No, it's because Peter Jackson finally said he'd do it.
Well, I can't remember if was that it or was it
I think that's mostly it. They were like, Peter, we want you to do this. And he was like, no, no, no. And they're like, all right, we're going to have Guillermo do it. And he was like,
Well, he was fine with Guillermo del Toro doing it.
Yeah, and then he was like,
but he didn't want to use any of Guillermo's assets.
I want to do it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, then they had to reset everything.
Yeah, they had to reset everything. They got rid of all the pre-pro Guillermo had done.
Man.
And then they just went straight into shooting because of the budget and the timeline. And so Peter Jackson, who previously on The Lord of the Rings had 3 years of pre-production, had basically 6 months worth of pre-production before he went into The Hobbit. 3 years of pre-production on Lord of the Rings and then 6 months on The Hobbit. And so first movie happened and it went relatively fine, but then that's when after the first movie came out, we started hearing about the second and third movie becoming a thing rather than just 2 movies. So we ended up getting 2 other movies and the reason why is because Peter Jackson was literally making the shit up on the fly with the script. There is video of Peter Jackson sitting on set. Everyone is in full costume. Everyone is in full fucking costume, waiting around to figure out, hey, what are we supposed to do next? And Peter Jackson is sitting there staring off into space, I don't know what to do. So here's here's what we're gonna do. Okay, we're done, we're wrapping. I'm gonna take the next 6 months and I'm gonna write the fucking script. And so they pushed back and so they delayed production by an entire year at the end of it, and that's why we ended up getting a third movie, and that's why the second one ends in a cliffhanger, turns into this whole fuckery. And the part of the short pre-production and the script and all this other shit was the reason why most of those movies were fucking green screened. Because if you watch behind the scenes, it's almost all green screen. Those movies, they're 90% CG.
I just don't like those movies.
Yeah. And the story's bad, the writing's bad. The acting is still pretty good. There's a lot of parts about the acting that are redeeming qualities. I will say that. I like Bilbo, who plays Bilbo. Martin.
Oh yeah. The guy, he was in like Sherlock, and I know him from Fargo.
Martin,
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, Martin, I can't think of his last name. But he plays Bilbo, and I think he actually does a pretty damn good job. But overall, yeah, those movies were a mess, and there was like this whole thing
about Ian Holm, who played him in the original trilogy.
No, yeah, not him.
Sir Ian Holm? Is he a sir now?
I don't know. But the production of that movie was a mess. Ian McKellen at points didn't want to be there playing Gandalf.
Yeah.
And there was a whole thing where the Warner Brothers execs had to meet with like the fucking Prime Minister of New Zealand because they had to like circumvent like labor laws or some shit so they could pay, like basically underpay their crew members because basically they had to go against New Zealand film crew members unionizing for them to make that movie. And a lot of people, there were protests in the fucking streets in New Zealand against The Hobbit. And they had to make an entire new law so they could actually get the movie in production. And it's called the Hobbit Law. And I think they're actually
The Hobbit Law?
Yeah, they're actually thinking about rescinding it soon. Unless it already happened. Huge tangent. I could talk about this all day.
I can tell.
But yeah, so Lord of the Rings, one of my favorite movies, though, otherwise. The Hobbit, they kind of fucked it up a little bit.
Yeah, but I feel like they're viewed as pretty separate entities.
They kind of are. But the Lord of the Rings, I would even go up to bat to say they're some of the greatest films ever created, ever in the history of mankind. I'm very extremely biased, but it's up there. Yeah. In terms of other movies that I really love, I mean, School of Rock's up there because nostalgia reasons. Yeah.
I think I'm getting a lot of nostalgia driven.
Oh, it totally is. But then Blade Runner's up there too. And I didn't see that until like 2 or 3 years ago.
That's fair.
Yeah. And among other movies, like Interstellar's up there. There's a few others. I mean, I'm sure there's some Dragon Ball Z movies in there that I grew up with. Yeah, that's pretty much sums me up. If that tells you a little bit of Collin backstory. What about you? What's your movie?
I put a lot of thought into this, and it's definitely it's not a great movie, and I don't know that
it doesn't have to be.
I don't know that it necessarily goes into a top 10. It's got to be in my top 5 though, because I love it so much. Anytime I'm like in a relationship or something, I'm like, oh, you got to watch this movie. I'm like, it's weird. It's a movie called Ravenous. It's got Guy Pearce, David Arquette.
Yeah, you told me about this movie.
I'm going to tell you about this. Yeah, David Arquette and Robert Carlyle. So, and it's got, I forget his name. He's like he's one of the heavier fellas in like a Beetlejuice, redheaded guy. If you saw him, you'd recognize him. I can't recall his name. He played the principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
I can't picture who that is. I've seen Ferris Bueller.
Okay. It's got him too. And it's also got another guy. He ended up being in Justified. He's been in stuff. You saw him, you'd go, oh, that guy too. There's a lot of like, oh, it's that guy. I know it's that guy. I know it's that guy in this movie. But the big ones are David Arquette, who's he even still acting anymore?
The name sounds so familiar, but I can't place.
He's in like the Scream movies.
Oh, Jesus.
Officer Dewey.
Officer Dewey.
You don't know David Arquette?
No, I don't think I do.
I think Patricia Arquette's his sister.
I mean, all these names sound familiar, but I can't place who they are.
Do you know Guy Pearce?
Guy Pearce.
Well, you need to see Memento, which stars Guy Pearce.
I have not seen fucking
and Joe
Memento.
Pantoliano, which we've already gone over. Bald fella from Matrix.
Extremely Italian name.
Yeah, yeah. It is. He was in Sopranos as well.
Oh,
yeah. Doesn't meet the best fate. But this movie, it's not. It's so. I mean, it's not great, but it's so fucking good.
It's an action movie, right?
No,
if I recall right.
No, it's marketed. If you were to go and watch its trailer, it's marketed as a horror film. That it is not. there is not a single scary moment in that entire movie. There's one moment where I think they try, but it doesn't really work. It's like for a weird jump scare and the way the music comes in, but like it doesn't lead up well. So you're kind of like, yeah, those are skeletons.
Skeletons, hooray.
Yeah, but what it's about is this guy, he was in like the Mexican-American War and played dead, but then somehow ended up getting behind enemy lines and capturing an enemy base. And so he was a hero, but everyone kind of knew that he'd screwed up and his whole, unit had gotten killed. So they sent him out in the middle of the Sierra Nevadas. And so he's out there in this, military fort. This is all, so this is a period piece with all these other misfit military people. And it drew a lot of inspiration from the Donner Party. And this person shows up and is like, hey, I was part of this party. We were traveling, west, and we got stuck in the snow and we started eating each other. I ran away. I think that the one guy's still there, and I think there's this woman still there, and I'm afraid he might eat her. We should go save him. And they go, oh, we'll go save him. So they go out there.
I remember you telling me about this now.
And then it really unfolds, and it's this weird... I'm always hesitant to say it's a cannibal movie, because when you say that, I think people get their own ideas of what a cannibal movie is. And at the heart of it, it kind of is, but it's really not. It's definitely a character piece and kind of a study of isolation and desperation and kind of what people will do to survive. And it's really neat when you get into it, but it's also just quirky and dumb. And like even the very opening of the movie has a quote, and then another thing shoots in. It's got this like sound effect, and it says like "Eat me, Anonymous," and it's just this. And it, from the get go, you're like, "What kind of movie are we watching?" And then throughout the movie, you're like, "What kind of movie is this?" Like the movie doesn't know what it wants to be. And a lot of the time, that's a weakness in a movie. You see that and you're like, oh, this movie really struggled because it didn't know if it wanted to be an action movie or a horror movie.
Had an identity crisis.
Yeah. This movie, weirdly enough, it totally plays to it as a strength. Like, this is a feature, not a bug. Like, this movie, because it didn't know what it wanted to be, it was a lot of things really well.
Interesting.
And I love it. I really like, this is a movie that I hold really near and dear, but like, I don't know that I'll ever do it for movie night, because I think it might be one of those people like, I don't think a lot of people will get it. I think they'll watch it and be like, that was just weird and not that entertaining. But I think some, I never sit down and expect someone to really like it.
Why do you like it so much?
I don't know. I think because of the reasons that I've said. I think the performances in it are great. I think there's just some really awesome one-liners, and I feel like I kind of get what it's going for.
Yeah.
And I feel like I get what it ended up being. So kind of like watching The Room, right? The Room's this notoriously terrible movie, but you can really watch The Room and try and understand what, what's his name?
Tommy Wiseau.
Yeah, and you can kind of watch it and start getting like, oh, I understand what Tommy Wiseau was trying to do. But then you also have, on the other hand, I see where he ended up. It's like you see the map, and to get from point A to point B, it was a straight line, and this motherfucker decided to do like an S, And I feel like there's moments in Ravenous where you can see it veering off course. But there's just so many, in my opinion, good moments, and it's a mostly tight script. There's not a whole lot of fat on there. This movie will never win an award. And
right.
But it's one of those, I always try and preface it's like, it's not a great movie, but it is one of my favorite movies of all time.
So when did you see this movie for the first time?
I remembered seeing a trailer for it.
Okay.
When I was a kid, well, when I was probably I was maybe like 12 or 13 or so. I was a young teenager or preteen or something. And then I saw a trailer, And I had this one guy, the dude he was a Minority Report, had like naturally blonde hair, like bleach blonde hair.
Okay.
He's been in a lot of stuff since, but it's got like, there's a scene where I remember him in a river standing, screaming like, ah, and he's like flexing. And I'm like, that looks cool. And it was marketed kind of as this weird horror movie. And then you never heard of it again. Like if it came out in theaters, it was in theaters for like a week. And then I was at my local video store, which I think was Video Plus, a small town I lived in. And I saw it on the shelf. It was like a knife. And in the knife's reflection, you saw like Guy Pearce's face and like maybe Robert Carlyle's. And I said Ravenous. And I flipped it over and I was like, oh shit, this is that movie I saw trailers for like 6 months ago. There's another movie I really like with Val Kilmer called The Salton Sea. Never even saw a trailer for it, but I saw posters for it in the movie theater and then later rented it. Also one of my favorite movies. Really, really good movie about like meth addiction, and it's like this tale of heartbreak and this guy deciding to do his own sting operation. It's pretty good. And anyway, but I rented it, and I don't know if I watched it alone my first time or if I had a couple
Ravenous,
of my friends. Ravenous, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I had a couple of my friends with me. But I remember popping it in and just being like, this is great. And at that point, I didn't know. I didn't know how to view film critically, but I remember just being like, this is great. This is everything they're doing. So I love a lot of movies. A lot of movies I really, really love critically. I think they're amazing. I think they're great films. But there's not a lot of movies that I go back and watch over and over again. That's a very short list. Ravenous is on that list. Boondock Saints used to be on that list, but after our last viewing, I feel like it maybe doesn't hold up so much. So I probably don't ever really need to watch it again. I've absorbed everything that movie has to give me. Ravenous, I probably have, but like it still tastes good, you know. I still want to go back and have a sip of that.
Yeah, it's a comfort food. I definitely have movies like that. Like I tell people all the time, I never get tired of watching Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yeah.
I never fucking get tired of that movie because I just love the atmosphere of that movie. Mm-hmm. And it resonates with me with like, of course, all the 90s references and the video game references and the music references. First
movie I ever saw Anna Kendrick and Aubrey Plaza in.
Oh, yes, that's true. Right? Is that the first one? The first one or the first one? It was
early in both of their careers, but this is like pre Parks and Rec, and then really before Anna Kendrick blew up. And then I was
2010 was when that movie came out.
Perfect and all that, and I remember being like, "What's up?"
Yeah, yeah.
It's got Macaulay Culkin's brother in it too.
It does, Kieran Culkin.
Yeah, he did a great job.
And yeah, I love the way he portrayed Wallace because that movie actually, because of that movie, I ended up reading Scott Pilgrim. Mm-hmm. And by extension became kind of a comic book nut. Not a comic book nut, but I got more into comics because of that.
Yeah.
And
like mostly indie comics?
I love that movie. And then I read the graphic novels and I love those fucking books even more by extension. And then everything that Brian Lee O'Malley has ever written, I love everything. Because everything he writes is just so fucking relatable. Yeah. And it's kind
of an everyman's like a nerd version of an everyman's tale.
Yeah, but from a cinematography standpoint, that movie is super interesting because the visual effects and the visual aesthetic of the film is wholly unique.
Oh yeah, no, they do some cool stuff, and they do like a little bit of fourth wall breaking, and then kind of like printing stuff on the screen, and it's not necessarily consistent throughout. So every time you got one of these little surprises and the editing, it's like a little treat, you know, because a lot of time they'll do, it's like a one trick in a good way, like a one trick pony. No, that's a bad phrase for it. It's, they do a little treat and you're almost like, and when you're waiting for the next time to do it, they just do something else. But it's every time it's golden. It's like if you're an audience member who's never read it, know nothing about Scott Pilgrim, you just saw the trailer, you go see the movie, every time it gets you with like a zinger, you're like, oh, that's neat. But then they never repeat it. It's like Edgar Wright does this stuff a lot too. And it's just like the directing and the way the story was told is just very, very well done. I had laughed a lot the first time I saw it. Second time it holds up a lot. I've only ever seen it twice. Once when we watched it together for movie night, and then when I saw it in theaters. Great movie. If someone hadn't seen it, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, 100%. It's just one of those movies. There's something about it that I just never fucking get tired of it.
It's full of treats.
Yeah, and you pick up.
It's like getting a little candy.
And every time you watch it, you pick up on something new, and especially if you read the graphic novel. So most all
soundtrack's great too.
Soundtrack is fantastic. And you can buy it on vinyl actually.
Nice.
If you read the book, all of it takes place in real locations in actual Toronto, Canada. And in the movie, they shot on location on almost all of those all of those places.
Oh, nice.
Like one or two of the venues they couldn't because they were actually closed. Like the real life locations were closed, so they filmed
closed, like permanently. Like
oh,
okay.
Yeah, so they filmed at like a different location. They dressed it up to look like the one in the book if they couldn't get the actual location.
You're guessing the author's from Toronto?
Yes.
Okay.
Very much so.
That makes sense.
But that apartment that they filmed in, like Scott and Wallace's apartment is like a real place you can actually, like all those places in the movie you can actually visit and go to and hang out in, which is fucking cool.
Yeah.
And so like that and just how it's rooted in life, it's like that was one of those movies, one of those book series where it's like, this is comfort food. Like this is, you know what I'm saying? Like this is, if I need to,
you never get full of it. You never sick. You may need a break, but you can still always return to that.
Right.
You know?
It's just so comfy. There's something very comforting about the way he writes and the way those books are written and the way that movie is. If I'm feeling like shit and I need like something, like I need comfort food, I listen to the music that I like, but maybe I'll watch Scott Pilgrim because I need to like calm myself down. There's something about it. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I could talk all day about the fucking movie, dude. I love that movie so much.
I think it's great to have a movie or a show or something that's comfort food. Lately for me, it's a show I think you should leave.
Really? I've heard about this show.
It's on Netflix. It is, in my opinion, comedy gold. I think it is. If you had to say what is the singular best thing on Netflix right now, I would say I think you should leave. It just speaks to my brand of comedy. It's very anti-comedy. Some of it's just like the bits go on longer than they need to. They're awkward. It's not like at the level of like Tim and Eric, but it's in lieu of, it's pretty good.
I fucking love like Tim and Eric type comedy. It's so fucking stupid and I love it.
You need to watch. I think you should leave. At least like when we're done with this.
Oh wait,
podcast,
I have heard about it. Yeah.
When we're done with this podcast, we're gonna watch the first sketch in the first episode. That's all. The first two sketches. That's all you need, and that's maybe about 10 minutes. But it is so good.
Yeah.
But I think if I had to choose one movie, it's probably Ravenous, and I wouldn't say it's like my favorite movie of all time, but it's the first thing that pops in my head, which means it's got to mean something. Immortals is pretty high up. I think every movie's kind of got its own things. I think one easy one's Fight Club. I think that was my introduction to like what a cinematographer can do and that was the first time I felt that the carpet had been pulled out from under me, like watching a movie when I was like, oh fuck. And again, I'm not going to spoil a movie that's 20 years old, but there's a moment in that movie when it all kind of comes together and you go, oh, like shit, that's what's happening. And I think that, when a movie can do that, and that's the first movie I remember ever doing that to me, where I now was like, I need to watch this movie again through another lens. Memento is the same way. Once you watch Memento, you can go through and watch it again a second time and you view it completely differently because where all the pieces play. Like that. It essentially plays the whole movie in reverse.
Yeah.
And so like the default way of watching it is the whole movie in reverse. So once you've seen it and you watch it again, where everything's going, but now you can view everything through a totally different lens. And I think Fight Club's the same way. Like once you've seen it, you can start it over immediately. And the second viewing is completely different from the first viewing because you're like, I understand everything that's happening now. And I see how it's happening. And it was all in front of me the entire time. And I just didn't realize it. And so I know it's kind of a cliche, like, oh, it's my favorite movie, but I think it's one of my favorites because it's the first movie to ever really pull that rug out from under me.
Yeah.
And I can't think of another movie that came before that did the same thing.
Yeah. And as we're kind of like starting to wind down here, so how do you think that movie and viewing those things and realizing those things about cinematography for the first time, how do you think that affected your future and kind of your technique as a cinematographer yourself?
Oh, it's a tough one, especially since I've been out of the game for so long. I think now the trickiest thing, if I were to, let's say, get back into the game, is how can I do something different?
Yeah, because you've been putting a lot of your energy towards photography, much less
Yeah,
cinematography.
yeah. Most of it's been in photography, and then
Yeah.
now kind of all the beer stuff. And so, if I were to get back into filmmaking, I think the way that it would affect me is to, the biggest thing is to I think I tried to resurrect something that was very old. And I think Quentin Tarantino does this a lot too. You got to pull from something that's not fresh anymore. That's something that's not fresh, not stale. It's just so old, like people forgot about it. And he started tapping into that stuff with like blaxploitation and stuff with like Jackie Brown, for example, when it came out, was a whole lot of like even Pamela Greer, who was like a famous blaxploitation actress, bringing her back.
Blaxploitation, what's that
So
mean?
that was blaxploitation is a lot of movies that came out in like the 70s, early 80s that were designed to specifically appeal to a black audience.
Like Black Dynamite and shit like
yeah,
that?
exactly.
Okay.
Like Black Dynamite. And Jackie Brown isn't necessarily like Jackie Brown isn't a blaxploitation film. It's very much just like kind of a Quentin Tarantino joint, but it pulls a lot of inspiration. And then the early trailers for Jackie Brown, it would be like Pamela Greer is, and then she would lean into the frame and go Jackie Brown, and then it would go into like another take of the same thing. It'd be like Pamela Greer is, and she'd lean in Jackie Brown.
Oh my God.
But that's how a lot of the ads for like these blaxploitation movies were in the 70s, where it would be like Pamela Greer was like a huge actress in these things.
Sure.
And it would be like Pamela Greer is, and she'd be like Jackie Brown.
Gotcha.
And so that's my earliest trailer, probably the earliest trailer I remember is for Jackie Brown.
Oh my God.
But like he took a style that wasn't necessarily dead because he did this in the late 90s.
Tarantino, you mean?
Tarantino, yeah. But pulled a lot from it. And he's still doing this. He does a lot with a lot of like the Western stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it in Pulp Fiction and stuff too.
Yeah, and then even Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is an homage to old Hollywood films, but not golden era. It was kind of that in between, like that transition from, your John Wayne to your Clint Eastwood. This kind of like how everything was kind of transitioning. And great movie, by the way. But I think that I would need to do something like that, or I would just default to a story that I would like to tell, which is probably a shitty person in a shitty situation. You make your bed and now you got to sleep in it kind of story. And I think I would want to start something in the middle of the story. I think that's something that would affect me, because I think I like it when you hop into a movie and let's say the first shot, like Reservoir Dogs.
And this is what a Mac film would look like
This
nowadays.
is kind of what I think a Mac film would look like. So Reservoir Dogs, for example, doesn't necessarily start here.
And would this film be a feature length or a short film?
Oh, it'd be a feature.
Okay.
If I could, I'd love to do a feature.
Sure. So yeah, please
but
continue.
in reality, it would probably be a short.
Yeah.
But like, let's say the beginning of Reservoir Dogs, you have this great diner scene where Mr. Pink's talking about how he doesn't tip, and this whole.
You think I'm gonna leave a fucking tip?
Yeah, it's this whole steep shimmy, just turn it up to 10. It's wonderful. Harvey Keitel. It's just so great. And then it cuts to, so you have that scene. Now they're all walking down the road, and it's just so good. And then your next scene after that is now we're driving down the road in a car, and I haven't seen in a while, so I could be wrong in the chronology, but I'm pretty sure it goes straight to this. You got Tim Roth in the back, bleeding from his stomach, going, "I can't believe she fucking shot me. That bitch fucking shot me. I can't believe she." And he's screaming. Which now I'm thinking like Immortals had a pretty similar scene anyway about the being shot in the stomach, complaining about some lady shooting you.
Yeah, if you want to go into the mythology of this episode, remember that time when we talked about
the Immortals for an hour and a half?
Yeah.
Is it the new Immortals podcast?
Yeah.
Not starring Gerard Butler. And so he's screaming about this, and now we're kind of in the middle of it. You go that whole movie, you never see the bank robbery. And Takeshi Kitano does the same thing with a lot of his movies, where he'll just kind of cut into after everything has happened. And I think that's how I'd want to start a movie. Like, I would want to start a movie. Some Hollywood movies will start it with like a high-speed chase. Like, you'll cut in and there's a car screeching around the corner, camera's following it. Now there's the cops. You have a cool chase, a car flips or whatever. And then next thing you know, they pull into a garage. Now you get your character introductions and all that out of the way. Like, oh, Tim, I can't believe you got away with that. And you kind of meet everyone, and then the story goes wherever it's going to go. I think I like the thought of starting a movie, not with the assumption, because you know that the audience doesn't know, but pretending that you're playing it out with the assumption that the audience knows who all the players are. Now, we had that diner scene in Reservoir Dogs because everyone knows, that's how everyone knows which characters are, who believes in tipping, who doesn't, who nods. You get a lot of character development just in that one scene.
Right.
I would want to forego all of that. I want to just start in the middle of a scene. Whatever big shit is happening has already happened. And the audience, because I don't like it when a movie treats the audience like they're dumb. Like, oh, this is Tim. Tim likes his coffee hot. This is Suzanne. She doesn't drink coffee. I'm like, we don't need to know all this stuff. I want to throw people in the middle of a story where they are almost a little confused, but intrigued, I want the audience to constantly feel like they're playing catch up. I want them to come into a scene and be like, okay, I don't really know who he is, but I know his face. Okay, it's played by Brad Pitt. Okay, he's really short tempered. Okay, over here's Steve Buscemi. He's trying to calm everyone down. Like, I want them to jump in the middle. Like you as a person are thrown in the middle of this scene, all these people fighting over something.
Right. Like Pulp Fiction, for example.
Pulp Fiction does it a lot, but you still get some character establishment. You get a lot of the banter between, John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson. They talk a lot.
Right. But doesn't it begin with the Tim Roth and the diner scene?
It does begin with that.
Yeah.
But now,
I love you, honey bunny, and all that stuff.
It still begins with a conversation. Now imagine if you started not with them chatting with each other, but you started with him jumping up and telling everyone to get down.
Get the fuck down.
That is the opening.
Yeah.
And now we roll straight from that into them walking over to Samuel L. Jackson, and Samuel L. Jackson saying the whole bad motherfucker wallet and all that.
So you're putting the ending at the beginning.
No, they're bending the middle.
Well,
I want to start in the middle of the shit. It's like imagining Saving Private Ryan, but you didn't have the scene where they're all on the boats, they're approaching the beach, 5 seconds, none of that. Literally cuts to, and this guy looks up and everything's exploding around him and he's got to get his unit together. They're already on the beach.
Okay.
I want to skip the getting up to the beach. I want to go, we're on the beach, like it's black. Now we're going. We're in the middle of it. And the audience is constantly going like, all right, I guess it's go time. They're trying to keep up.
Yeah, sensory over. I think there's something to be said though with I think Saving Private Ryan's kind of one of those things where you want to build that anxiety.
And Spielberg nailed it. I'm not trying to say that I would have done Saving Private Ryan differently because I think he did it perfectly.
Right.
But I'm saying,
but to make your point, I see what you're saying.
If I did Saving Private Ryan, if you
were
like, hey, I want you to do a movie like Saving Private Ryan, I would have my scene start. I wouldn't follow I wouldn't follow those Rangers going up the beach. I would follow the 101st guys who were jumping out of the planes. But I wouldn't start with the scene because, they had the beach invasion and then the planes flying over where the airborne were jumping out, dropping down behind enemy lines. So it was a 2-tiered assault, in when we invaded Normandy. What I would do is I wouldn't have the scene where they're in the plane, a guy's kissing his cross, another guy's reading his Bible, and then another guy's like talking about, I can't wait to get home to Betty. Like, I wouldn't have any of that shit. I wouldn't have the 5 seconds till jump, and the light red and it cuts to green and everyone jumps out. Like, I wouldn't have any of that. I would literally cut to black, cuts in, we're in the middle of the scene. It's a close up on a paratrooper in the air with a bunch of other ones, and a flak cannon just goes off next to him, blows up the dude next to him. Blood spatters on him. Part of his chute snaps, and he's in a free fall. And then that shit catches in a tree. He's hanging there. He sees his buddies coming down landing. He has to cut himself loose. Like, let's say there's a Nazi who sees him, who's about to shoot him, and then his buddy shoots a Nazi. He cuts himself loose. Now he's in the middle of the shit. That's how I open my movie. And that's how that would be my style. It's like, oh, if we're going to watch a movie by Mac, it's like, it's going to start with the bad shit already happening. Like, let's say it's a movie like Killing Them Softly, which is these two guys who essentially rob a mob card gang and then get way in over their head. So shitty things happen to shitty people. It's another reason why I really love that movie. There's a lot of lead up to it, and there's some really good lead up. There's a great dialogue where he's like, oh, I asked you to get me a sawed-off shotgun. But, like, you see the shotgun, and it's sawed off so much that the tip of the shells are sticking out of the barrel. He's like, this is going to kill everyone in the room. He's like, hey, you asked for a sawed-off. I got you a sawed-off. It's this whole dialogue. It's wonderful. Then they go in, then they do the thing, and then you get a little bit of character development. I would skip that. It would literally cut in. They're in the middle of robbing the mob game. They're already in there. It's already happening.
Yeah. What would happen for the rest of the movie?
Most of the same stuff.
Okay.
But like the audience, the hook is right there where you are constantly like, who's this guy? Who's this guy? Who's this guy? And you figure that out as it goes. You're
putting like the rising action right before the climax in the front of the movie, essentially.
I put the climax in the front of the movie. The point of no return has already happened. It's like, and we are now directly after it's happened. They've already kicked in the door. They've already stormed the game. Where now it cuts in. We're in the middle of the scene. There's even, let's say, this doesn't happen in Killing Them Softly, but let's say they shoot a guy and blow off his foot. Cuts in. There's a dude on the ground screaming with his foot blown off. And you now got one dude, like the camera's just cut in. And you have a dude reloading his shotgun while another dude's aiming his gun, telling everyone to be cool. So as soon as it goes on, the audience is like, did I fucking miss something? They're just constantly playing catch up. Because that is like, if you're in that actual situation, you're robbing a card game, everything's moving at 1,000 miles an hour. It's full panic. It's nothing but for everyone in that room, it's sheer panic. There's not a cool character there. And I would want the audience to feel that same exact way. I want them to come in just as confused as everyone in that room. But my goal would be to have as many scenes as possible have that feeling, where it's not until the end of the movie that the audience finally feels like they can breathe. You know, they can take their shoes off and relax. But until those credits roll, I want them to be like, shit. You know, I want them to be out of breath. And so I would want to start, even like throughout the dialogues, like if there's a moment where it cools down and people are talking, I want them to always to be asking like, who's this guy? Who are they talking to? Like, I don't want to treat an audience like they're dumb. And a lot of movies treat us like TV shows. A lot of TV shows, before you can get before you can get funded, you essentially have to have a pilot.
Right.
Your pilot, there's a lot of requirements. You have to introduce the main players. You have to introduce the plot. What's the main struggle here? Where are we going? You can't show us, I mean, Netflix maybe, but most places you can't just approach ABC and be like, hey, here's my pilot. I'm not going to introduce any characters. It's just going to be in the middle of it. And then credits going to roll after 25 minutes or 22 and a half minutes. We're just going to roll credits. And no one's really going to know who anyone is because it's going to take about 5 episodes to figure that out. That's why, again, why I don't want to make a TV show. I'd rather make, now Netflix, you can do it. But, or like now Amazon Prime as well.
Right.
So that's how I would make a movie. And that's what I've learned, because I've learned that so many things now, there's so much hand holding for the audience. You go in, the whole first episode's about introducing characters, like Umbrella Academy, great show, but the first episode's all about laying out the groundwork for the rest of the show. Yeah,
there's always that, for a lot of TV shows, it sucks when the onboarding process is like, oh wait, you got to watch the first 2 or 3 episodes to really get into the flow of the show.
Movies are the same way. So you sit down and watch. I mean, you could name almost any major movie. Now it's getting the more art film stuff. They do things a little different. But
if you're an anime, it takes like 10, 15 episodes, and then you get.
It takes 3 seasons, then it really gets good.
Yeah.
So I just got 60 hours of it. Yeah. But a lot of movies now, you go in the first 15 minutes, you're. Oh, he's a family man. He's really into sports cars, and he's got a dog. And, the way that's going to play out through the rest of the movie is later, the dog's going to save his life. It's going to attack someone. It's a sidekick in his car. He's a good driver already, because that was established in the first 15 minutes. He was on his racetrack with his daughter. He's a family man. He drives cars. So when there's a high-speed chase later, it's already established. He knows how to do that. That's how it opened. It opened telling you who this was, who the players are. Maybe he goes into his office and he's like, he's looking at a bank statement. Now we know he's in debt. So now you know you've got a family. In 15 minutes, he's a family man. He likes to bond with his daughter over cars. He's got a pet dog that maybe there's a scene where he's like, heel, and it does instantly what he says. So now we know, he's got a well-trained dog. So later if he tells it to attack, it's not a surprise. And now we know he's in debt. Then you have the mob guys roll up to his house. And they're like, hey, Louie, where's our money? Okay, he not only is he in debt, he owes money to the mob. And then now his wife's complaining to him. Oh, he's got a gambling problem. That's why he's in debt and owes money to the mob. But he's put all of his money in these race cars because he wants to win these races. I just wrote the first 20 minutes of your movie for you. See, for me, I want to skip all that shit. The mob is showing up at his house and they want their money and he responds. We don't establish he's trained the dog or any of that. You can see he's got a kid because she's screaming, but he sicks the dog on the mob guy, takes him out, and he's like, all right, we're moving to Alabama. Or whatever the next is going to happen. The point of no return is the opening of the movie for me because I'm like, the only reason all that exists is to hold the audience's hand and introduce everyone. It's like, think of it as you go to a party with a friend and you walk into that room where everyone's gathered, they're all having their beers and your friend's introducing you to everybody.
Right.
And then your friend's like, oh, I'm going to go catch up with these people. You already know everyone, so you can kind of go chat to people. I want to make a movie where it's like, you just showed up at a party you weren't invited to and you're hammered. That's the movie I want to make. You walk into that room and you're like, I'm going to have fun tonight. I don't know anybody. And that is the movie I like.
And by the end of it, you're going to be fucked up.
By the end of it, you have an amazing story that started off with zero hand-holding. Like this person walks in and is like, I'm here to have, like you kick in the door, like, I'm here to have a good time. And everyone's like, let's do it.
Let's do it.
And
yeah, the fucking party's here.
Yeah, that's the way I want to make a movie. I understand that doesn't necessarily have as much of a mass audience appeal because I think a lot of people would show up and be like, if the critics would be like, it was so confusing. I don't know what he was trying to get across. And I'm like, that's the point. Like I would design it to be confusing.
Exactly. I am all for breaking convention when it comes to movies.
Well, it's like beer. It's like I get bored of the basic stuff. I want the adjuncts. I want to mix it up. I want something that's weird and different and like exciting and I think that change is good. And so
and it pushes the medium forward.
Yeah,
too.
And then I love stuff that makes no sense. And there's I wish I had one I could throw off top of my head, but I like it when a movie, the whole movie, it's playing it straight, but then there's just a scene that really makes no sense. It's out of character. It almost doesn't belong. It feels like it was written for something else, but it was just inserted. I love it. And I was talking to Dave the other day about Mindhunter season 2. And I haven't seen all the episodes yet, but supposedly they're going to interview.
Dave is a friend of the brewery for reference.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's an episode where they're going to interview like Charles Manson, right? And I was like, what if the whole scene was still played straight? So they go, okay, buzz him in, bring Charlie in. I'm like, okay, so you got these two FBI guys, they're sitting at the table, right? And then all of a sudden walking down the hall, you just hear like, it's a little more of like a flap, 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 flap. And then in walks Charles Manson wearing like massive clown shoes, and like something else absurd. Let's just say he's wearing like a pink onesie. Who knows? And he sits down. No one acts fazed. No one acts confused. We all know who Charles Manson is. We know this isn't how he dressed or acted. But he sits down and he's like, why do you guys want to talk to me? And then he like lifts up like a horn and just like, And then they just look at him straight face. He's maybe even got one of those little flowers that squirts water, and it cuts to like one of the FBI guys like saying their lines, and they're like, well, we work for the FBI. We want to investigate you. And like the water just spatters on their face, but they don't even blink. They just keep reading out their lines as if it wasn't happening. The whole rest of the show, nothing like this at all. It's just this scene, and then they never explain it. They finish their interview. It cuts to them driving in the car, and they talk about it as if none of that shit ever just happened. Well, the interview did, but none of the water, none of the clown shoes, none of the horn. And it's just the peak way to fuck with an audience. Because everyone there is just going to be like, are we not going to address this? And to me, like if I was a showrunner, I would know my career is over after this, but it would be so worth it. It's a very Kaufman-esque joke because the joke would be for me. It'd be like, I want everyone to wonder, like there would be you know how many articles there would be about what was that Charles Manson scene about? That would be whoever fucking Washington Post, like, what was that Charles Manson scene in Mindhunters about? You know, Kotaku, everyone would fucking write about it. And there would be zero explanation. No one, I wouldn't respond to any. I'd be like, I just tried to play it straight.
Hey there, Collin in Post here. So sorry to end the episode awkwardly on you. So it turns out at the end of recording this episode, we actually got a noise complaint because we were just having a little too much fun. So I'm going to do the rest of the job here and finish signing the episode off. Again, sorry about that. So this has been Collin in Mono. You can email the show with any comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, ideas at collininmono@gmail.com. You can also follow the show on social media at Collin in Mono on both Instagram and Twitter. Mac actually chose at the end of this episode to keep his profiles on social media a secret. So didn't get that from him. And so I'm going to respect his privacy there. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode with Mac. I know it was a long one, but we had a blast recording it. And I hope this worked as, like I said at the beginning of the show, an escape for you guys. And again, I hope you and yours stay healthy. I will see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.